Lord of Mysteries, Lord of Order by Da Bai Bu Shi Xiong. Chapter 526-550. As the capital of the Intis Republic, and the center of culture and art on the northern continent, Trier is one of the few metropolises that can rival Backland and St. Mylon. On the north bank of the Sorrenzo River, which cuts through Trier, the arch-cathedral of the God of Steam and Machinery Church stood tall with thick, iron-black chimneys, from which large amounts of light white mist billowed upwards like a forest, obscuring the morning light. Jord Hawkins, a member of the Pre-God Council and the Archbishop of the Church of Steam and Machinery, with a solemn expression, passed through a pure copper door inlaid with gears. The sounds of hammering and forging instantly faded, but the heavy metallic scent grew even stronger. Praise be to you, great God of Steam and Machinery. You are the embodiment of essence, the protector of artisans, the radiance of technology. Accompanying the deep, indifferent prayers, the ethereal light on the hall walls pulsed, like seemingly thin projected scrolls, yet giving an extremely profound sensation. Even though he was somewhat anxious, Jord Hawkins dared not speak again. He looked at the tall figure with long chestnut hair, back turned to him, beneath the altar directly ahead, and could only suppress his emotions, waiting for the solemn prayer to conclude. His clasped hands released, Bonneva Gustav drew the triangular holy emblem across his chest with his right hand, his azure eyes reflecting the triangular holy emblem of the God of Steam and Machinery on the altar. His gaze slowly moved among the symbols of steam, gears, and levers within the stable triangle. He seemed to have lost all emotions, with no change in expression, as if he were merely a puppet. Is there a result from the investigation? Feeling an inexplicable suppression, Jord Hawkins took a deep breath, involuntarily lowered his head, and slowed his tone. Respected Saint Bonneva, we have confirmed with the Eternal Blazing Sun Church and the Sauron family that the meteorological disaster in the southern suburbs of the Trier region and the lower reaches of the Sorrenzo River last night was caused by the fall of a weather warlock. The Eternal Blazing Sun Church believes that the fallen one was very likely the one from the Iron and Blood Cross Order, and it is temporarily impossible to identify which hidden organization made the move. Holding his breath, Jord Hawkins waited for a response, somewhat nervously. In just the past few months, first, Zeratul, the half-dead leader of the Hermit Order who had been in that state for many years, suddenly returned. After a series of blood moons, an angel inexplicably fell. He always had a premonition of an impending storm. Bonneva slowly turned around. His azure eyes, however, passed over Jord Hawkins, looking through the densely packed steam pipes into the distance, a subtle change appearing in his indifferent expression. At the same time, metal parts with strange patterns flowed out from the ring on his right hand, instantly assembling into a palm-sized puppet. Ethereal light interwoven and finally disappeared into its glabella. The oppressive atmosphere suddenly lightened. Jord Hawkins stared blankly at the puppet that had suddenly appeared in his hand for a few seconds, then subconsciously looked up at the empty altar in front of him. A sudden whistle sounded in his ears, and the Archbishop's expression changed dramatically. He had just heard a similar sound last night. This was an alarm from a special sealed artifact stored beneath the Arch-Cathedral, targeting angel-level powers. The long whistle echoed over Trier. Beyonders with higher spirituality felt it more clearly, while ordinary people busy with their early morning routines did not notice. It was only when rays of sunlight shone upwards from a magnificent and elegant golden palace into the sky, condensing into a miniature sun, that exclamations arose. This sun cast its light over the entire Trier region. Morning seemed to instantly turn into noon, and a translucent female figure, clad in a white robe with gold embroidery, emerged. Her sun-like pupils gazed northward, seemingly recognizing the arrival. A playful smile appeared on her sacred and beautiful face, but the blazing white spear in her hand remained vigilant. Innumerable knowledge surged like a torrent, condensing at the edge of the Trier region into Bernadette, who wore a brown captain's coat, had long chestnut hair, and eyes like the azure sea. She felt several auras locking onto her, but she acted as if she were merely passing by, not continuing to provocatively delve deeper into Trier. After only a few glances, she transformed back into a torrent of information and vanished. The golden token containing Bonava's humanity became even more brilliant within the torrent of information. When Bernadette reappeared, she had already arrived at a certain isolated island in the Fog Sea, whose coordinates had been marked long ago. Bernadette did not have to wait long. Bonava, capable of responding to prayers across the entire world, descended on his own accord. Two pairs of equally azure eyes met. Unauthorized, divinity weakened. A majestic voice interrupted the silent gaze between the siblings. Bonava's expression changed significantly, and he immediately felt his own divinity suppressed. His Beander abilities, derived from arcane scholar and knowledge magister, and even his divinity, were greatly restricted. As an authorized individual, after releasing the hidden state, Astolfo, who was not suppressed in any way, fully displayed the abomination authority of a king of angels, bit by bit opening Bonava's humanity that had been imprisoned by divinity. Streaks of dim, colorless light, as if composed of countless illusory things, flowed across Bonava's body, and a grand will contained within them seemed to awaken. Misty light surged from nothingness, manifesting around Bonava as one projected scroll after another, with a human-shaped outline of light and shadow appearing within them. Seeing the main figure arrive, Aaron's figure materialized in the void, standing before Bernadette and Astolfo, and smiled as he slightly bowed towards the light and shadow. "I apologize, this is the first time we officially meet, and it is under such circumstances, esteemed god of steam and machinery." The struggle on Bonava's face became more pronounced, but the will within the illusory scrolls formed by the misty light paid no heed. Infinite information transformed into complex light, making the figure appear even more real. A grand, gender-neutral voice, indistinguishable as male or female, echoed throughout the special world enveloped by the embryonic divine kingdom the next moment. "This is the power of the nation of disorder. How did you do it?" Although he wanted to reply with, "Guess," like a certain ill-mannered Aemon, to avoid interrupting negotiations, Aaron chuckled and responded. "Everyone has their own secrets, but I can confirm that the seals on the western continent are intact, at least before the barrier breaks or a new lord of the mysteries is born." Without delving further into the question, the will of the god of steam and machinery swept over Bernadette and Astolfo, pausing slightly on the latter. His majestic voice carried a hint of fluctuation. "Without the help of an outer deity, you were actually able to break free from his pollution and reach this point." The wriggling, malevolent vines, transformed into tangible curses, receded back into Astolfo's body. In Astolfo's blood-red eyes, the figure, entirely formed of shimmering light, was reflected as a hoarse, low voice echoed. "Fate has favored me this time, just like it favored you back then. The long wait has finally brought hope." As if ancient memories had been stirred, the god of steam and machinery, whose figure was becoming clearer, fell silent for a few breaths before withdrawing his gaze from Astolfo. He glanced at Aaron, and the scroll of civilization gradually unfurled, instantly easing the tense, confrontational atmosphere. Behind him, Bonava Gustav, whose face was full of struggle, suddenly half-crouched, collapsing weakly, his face pale and breathing heavily, like a drowning man pulled ashore. Such a state seemed incredible for a complete mythical creature, but Aaron, feeling the changes in the surrounding order, showed a smile on his face. Seeing that the god of steam and machinery had actively withdrawn the excess divinity of the blessing given to Bonava, Astolfo retracted the curses that stimulated humanity. Aaron's eyes flickered, and he instantly acted, using the authority of a king of angels and the power of the balancer to rebalance Bonava's somewhat unbalanced divinity and self-cognition. Actions are often more convincing than words. After demonstrating his sufficient leverage and value, this paragon actively released his goodwill. Bernadette, who had been silently observing from the side, stared intently with her blue eyes at Bonava, who had a complex expression and had stood up again, as if she had finally confirmed something. But before she could speak, the ethereal and majestic voice of the god of steam and machinery came from her ear. "I never truly gave up on Russell, but after he was subtly corrupted by the mother goddess of depravity, his already arrogant personality became radical. To break free from the church's constraints, and to gain the strength to lead his followers to survive in the cosmos when the apocalypse arrives, he chose to cooperate with Adam and forcibly ascend to become the Black Emperor. Bernadette withdrew her gaze from Bonneva and looked directly at the light figure, her lips pursed. As a true god, did you never realize he had a problem? Ignoring Bernadette's somewhat offensive questioning tone, the god of steam and machinery calmly replied. During that time, the outer deities, led by the mother goddess of depravity, were extremely active, diverting the attention of the gods, and Russell, with the help of Beagle Abraham, truly left the barrier. By the time he returned, and I realized the problem, it was too late. Therefore, I tacitly allowed him to ascend to emperor, tacitly allowed him to assault the Black Emperor's godhood with Adam's help, and killed him before the mother goddess of depravity could use this to infiltrate the barrier. I have always been waiting for him to return like Solomon, cleansing all corruption and being reborn in the astral world, but unfortunately, it seems there may not be enough time now. Aaron chuckled, breaking the somewhat subtle silence, and continued meaningfully. George III will not ascend to the Black Emperor's godhood. As for Russell, he has long since awakened, but the mother goddess of depravity's corruption still exists. To prevent the disaster from spreading to reality, he himself voluntarily halted his resurrection. Looking at Bernadette and Bonneva, whose expressions were moved, Aaron added in an undeniable tone. Only an outer deity can resist an outer deity. This is also the only way to truly save Russell. After comforting the siblings, Aaron met the gaze of the god of steam and machinery. In his hand appeared the sage characteristic containing the residual information of the hidden sage, and he directly threw it towards the scroll of civilization formed by the shimmering light, as a response to his previous goodwill. This contains the hidden sage's imprint. With your authority, you should be able to gain some useful things. If necessary, I can cooperate with you to truly eliminate the hidden sage. This is an invitation for cooperation. Looking at this nascent divine kingdom formed by the projection of the nation of disorder's power, the scroll of civilization around the god of steam and machinery instantly swallowed the sage characteristic mixed with the information torrent, and also showed his sincerity for cooperation. I only need the hermit uniqueness and that knowledge emperor characteristic. The hidden sage and everything remaining from the Moses ascetic order will be yours. At the same time, the invisible barrier that had been restraining Bonneva disappeared, and only whispers echoed in his ears. Bonneva Gustav will no longer hold any positions in the church. Retracting the nascent divine kingdom, Aaron watched as the light transformed from the scroll of civilization returned to the astral world, examining the peculiar special symbol left by the god of steam and machinery, a structure woven from numerous illusory and complex pieces of information. A directional chat function, Aaron, who instantly saw through its essence, clicked his tongue, put it away, and then looked at Bonneva, who was somewhat dazed, and said with a smile. Congratulations on regaining your freedom. Once your condition stabilizes, I have some sealed artifacts that I need you to reforge. Bonneva was not an unknown minor figure. His sensitive identity was not suitable to be exposed to other forces, especially before the god of steam and machinery decided to fully enter the fray. This unspoken understanding was mutually acknowledged. But for those randomly formed, highly side effect-ridden grade 0 sealed artifacts and spare angel characteristics, an angel-level artisan could utilize them to the greatest extent, transforming them into the most direct combat power, which was also the most urgent problem Aaron needed to solve. Bonneva nodded slightly, bowed solemnly to Aaron, and then forced a smile onto his pale face, whispering with a complex tone. If it weren't for his protection, perhaps I would have died in the purge by the eternal blazing sun church and the Sauron family back then, and I would have been unable to protect Charles's descendants. At this point, he sighed and looked at Bernadette. At this moment, the Queen Mystic's expression revealed an undisguised joy. Not disturbing the siblings, Aaron and Astolfo exchanged glances, and their figures disappeared simultaneously. Rorstad Archipelago, Byam, the City of Generosity. The hanged man, Alger Wilson, wearing a hood, casually walked around a few times before arriving in front of an attic and ringing the doorbell. Thanks to the chaotic naval battles after Lowen officially declared war, He had completely digested the wind-blessed potion and, with the help of the ghost ship's unique ability to fish in troubled waters, had gained many benefits. A considerable portion of these benefits he sent to Charles the artisan. After all, well-forged mystical items could be exchanged for more gold pounds in the black market, to pay the reward promised by Mr. World, for helping him find the Obni's sea monster to complete the ritual. As the slightly muffled doorbell rang, Alger, the hanged man, pinched his earlobe with his right hand hidden under his hood, carefully listening to the sounds carried on the wind. The faint clanging sounds of hammering echoed through the door crack, yet they were eerily, mechanically repetitive. Amidst a series of rustling, strange noises, the door automatically swung inward, revealing a slightly dim interior. Alger's heart sank slightly, and he instantly recalled some of the craftsman's previous abnormalities, but he wasn't overly flustered. After all, this was Byam, the city of generosity, and Sea King Aeon Kotman was in the city's Waves Church. Although he was still pondering whether to use the church's power to investigate the anomaly here and cut his losses in time, Alger had already pretended to be nonchalant and retreated backward, yet the corner of his eye caught sight of green pea vines dangling from high above. In an instant, they intertwined behind him, forming a lush, dense aerial forest whose top could not be seen, with vines twisting and spiraling into pathways, unashamedly hanging before him. Looking at this incredible spectacle, fine beads of sweat seeped from Alger's rugged, deeply etched face, and his rapid heartbeat pounded like a drum. He did not try to resist, nor did he cry out for help. To dare to act directly in Byam, without even attracting the attention of Lord Kotman, was beyond what a demigod could achieve. A demigod wielding a sealed artifact of Sequence 0, or a true angel. Alger pursed his slightly bitter lips, took a deep breath, and with a gust of wind generated beneath his feet, he leapt into the aerial forest. Using the cover of the wind, he recited the honorific name of the fool at the fastest speed in a voice only he could hear. The melodious whistle drifted away, and Klein, whose appearance had changed, withdrew his gaze from the tranquil Tingen city outside the window, adjusted his top hat, and sat down by the window of the steam train. His experiences in Mist Town and the scorching battlefield in the Amantha Mountains had completely digested his bizarro sorcerer potion. Considering the secret about King George III he obtained by communing with Panatia, the despairing nightingale, he decided to return to Backland. Leaning against the not-so-comfortable seat back, Klein had just unfolded the newspaper in his hand when a short, muffled prayer suddenly reached his ears. "Mr. Hanged Man." Klein paused, observed his surroundings to locate the washroom, then got up and walked over. Closing the door, Klein used a paper figurine substitute to conceal his true form, then directly walked 4 steps counterclockwise, arriving above the gray fog, and sat in the position belonging to the fool. Bernadette. After clearly seeing the prayer scene and recognizing one of the figures within, his expression instantly turned strange. Backland Street. George's district, the Backland headquarters of the God of Steam and Machinery Church, Street. Serene Cathedral. Dong, dong, dong. 12 chimes rang out in succession, and white steam spewed from the chimneys at the top of St. Serene Cathedral. Praising hymns, accompanied by the rotation of giant gears and levers, echoed both inside and out. In the square in front of the cathedral, everyone stopped their steps. At this sacred moment, they either closed their eyes in prayer or listened quietly, regardless of whether they were followers of the God of Steam and Machinery. Only the fed white pigeons simultaneously flapped their wings and soared into the sky. And in the underground area of the cathedral, within the exclusive laboratory, Archbishop Horamek Haydn, dressed in a white priest's robe and wearing a clergyman's soft cap, looked solemnly at the unfamiliar man standing before the triangular holy emblem, his gaze lingering more on the other party's wrist. It was a special symbol, composed of numerous illusory and complex pieces of information, with a strange structure. As a member of the Divine Council, Horamek naturally knew what this symbol represented within the church, so even though he had never seen the other party before, he still spoke in a gentle tone. "Your Excellency the Blessed, what do you need on this visit?" Aaron, who had altered his appearance and concealed his aura, glanced at Horamek Haydn, who was scrutinizing him, smiled, and succinctly said, "I want to take a Rhodes, the magic mirror." Noticing the change in the Archbishop's expression, he calmly added, "You can pray to the god of steam and machinery for confirmation." Listening to the casual tone, Horamek's eye twitched slightly, somewhat doubting the identity of the other party as a blessed, but he said nothing, clasped his hands together, and prayed devoutly in a low voice. He didn't wait long before Horamek suddenly looked up, gave Aaron a deep look, and the creaking sound of gears turning emanated from underground. Soon, another, Horamek, came up from deeper underground, holding a mirror in his hand. It was entirely silver, with ancient and mysterious patterns on its back, and an eye-like decoration on each side of its front. It was none other than a Rhodes, the magic mirror. Several silver-white electric arcs escaped from the mirror's surface, carving cracks on Horamek, revealing the unusually complex mechanical structure inside. This was merely a mechanical puppet. With a slight curl of his lips, Aaron's right hand made a grasping motion, and the ancient silver mirror came into his hand. The garbled code on the mirror's surface instantly solidified, only to tremble and continue to appear after Aaron tapped the mirror's surface. "Humble, tiny Rhodes greets you, trembling at your gradually recovering aura." Horamek stood not far away, and naturally saw the intermittently appearing words. From the font alone, he could feel Rhodes's nervousness and flattery. It seemed to be the first time this ill-tempered magic mirror had behaved in such a way, and the usually stern Archbishop's expression was somewhat peculiar at this moment. Flipping his hand to block the swaying illusory ripples on the mirror's surface, Aaron nodded to Horamek, then symbolically drew a triangular holy emblem on his chest before his figure abruptly vanished. Southern Backland region, north bank of the surging Tassoc River. Aaron's figure emerged from the spirit world, released the restriction on Rhodes, and looking at the somewhat apprehensive magic mirror, he smiled and said, "How come I feel you're not very happy to see me?" The mirror's surface trembled slightly, and silver words appeared one by one. "Respected, great Lord of Order, it is my honor, humble Rhodes, to receive your favor and escape the ignorant steam church." Seeing that Aaron did not refute, after a few seconds, the silver words on the surface of the magic mirror wriggled and recombined, forming a new sentence, tentatively asking, "So, are you preparing to send me back to my lord's side?" Looking at Rhodes's unusual thought process, Aaron tapped the mirror's surface and added with a playful tone, "Aemon and Zeratul are both searching for Saphira Castle. Are you sure you want me to send you there now?" It seemed that the two words, Aemon, had stirred up some terrifying memories, as the illusory ripples on the surface of the ancient silver mirror suddenly solidified. After a long while, it resignedly floated back into Aaron's palm, its mercury-colored words turning grayish-white, appearing quite dejected. Looking at the dispirited Rhodes, Aaron nodded in satisfaction and casually drew a picture. "Taking you out of the Church of Steam was not without cost. If you perform well and demonstrate your corresponding value, I will consider fulfilling your wish at an appropriate time." The ancient silver mirror suddenly glowed with renewed vigor, and golden words wriggled and recombined. "Praise your mercy, great Order Master. Rhodes will wait patiently." Aaron nodded noncommittally, pondered for a moment, then looked at Rhodes and casually said, "Tell me, where is Raft Pound Baronet of Lowen now?" Ever since the Red Angel evil spirit in the underground ruins successfully escaped with the help of Ince Zangwil in 008, this Tudor descendant, who had changed his name, disappeared. Even Bernadette's divination of fate could only yield vague revelations that he was still alive and in Backland, as if he was being interfered with by some power. The golden characters faded, and the rippling mirror surface stabilized, revealing an underground hall with a distinct fourth epic style. A figure stood on a black iron high-backed chair at the deepest part. Completely different from the playboy who was once addicted to wine and women, Raft Pound was now surrounded by a tangible aura of iron and blood, clearly already a demigod. He wore a black iron badge on his chest, on which was carved a scepter and a hand gripping the scepter. This was the imperial emblem of the Fourth Epic Tudor Empire. Aaron frowned slightly, looking at Raft Pound in the image, who seemed like a changed person. Many questions arose in his mind. Even if he had found and opened the treasure left by Alista Tudor by virtue of his descendant bloodline, it would be impossible for him to become a demigod in such a short period of time. Before he could continue to question Rhodes, his face immediately darkened, and he instantly knew the answer. Raft Pound in the mirror seemed to know he was being spied upon. He slowly raised his head, a strange smile on his face, and very naturally took out a monocle from midair, muttering as he put it on. I thought Medici would be the first to find this avatar. Tisk, but it doesn't matter anyway. Deep within the aerial forest formed by green vines, within the special barrier created based on mystical reenactment, Bono Gustav, dressed in a simple robe, glanced at Alger, whose body trembled slightly and whose hood was already soaked with cold sweat. He turned his head to Bernadette, who wore a faint smile, and playfully remarked, I'm suddenly very curious about how those guys from the Storm Church would react if they knew their missionary had secretly converted. Even though Alger had tried his best to keep his voice down during his previous prayer, it was as good as nothing to the two angels, especially to Bonoa, who was hearing the complete honored name for the first time. Although he did not inherit any blasphemy card from Rosal due to his identity, he was very clear about the meaning of fool. Bernadette's lips curved slightly. Remembering Aaron's previous instructions, she did not dwell on the matter. She turned her head and gestured to craftsman Sharf, who stood behind her with a pale face. After being educated by Bernadette in her own way, this rebellious descendant of Rosal's eldest son was noticeably much more obedient. He directly threw all the mystical items he had originally promised to Alger, and straightforwardly bid farewell. Everything you ordered is here. May we meet again. Watching Sharf disappear after being entangled by a verdant vine, Alger opened his mouth but ultimately did not take out the remaining more than £1,000 of final payment from his pocket. He quickly checked everything to ensure nothing was missing, then stood in place, somewhat uneasy. Such high-ranking figures like the popes and cardinals of the major churches could not possibly target an ant like him. The only possibility was Mr. Fool. As Alger's mind raced, conceiving all sorts of possibilities, Bernadette's clear and cold voice suddenly reached his ears. Your ghost ship contains the hidden treasure of Blood Emperor. We came to buy him this time not only to retrieve Sharf's scattered bloodline but also to reclaim that ghost ship. Both Alger and Klein, who was silently spectating from above the gray fog via prayer light spots, were stunned, followed by expressions of extreme surprise that simultaneously and tacitly appeared on both their faces. Compared to Klein's pure curiosity about the Blood Emperor's treasure, Alger's emotions were much more complex. Although he had initially seized that ghost ship on the sea, it was now the property of the Storm Church. If it were to disappear without explanation, not to mention the Storm's believers who were originally on board disguised as pirates, he certainly couldn't bear the Church's subsequent accountability. Alger felt bitter, but looking at the two great figures who made his spirit body tremble even when they restrained all their aura, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. Without even needing the Eye of Secrets, Bernadette easily deciphered Alger's concerns. She raised her hand and beckoned. The next second, in the center of the aerial forest, the Azure Avenger suddenly appeared. Looking at the crew members drinking and playing cards on the deck, oblivious to the changing surroundings, Alger's body trembled slightly. Before he could speak, he saw gears and spiritual light clusters flying out from beside the man in the simple robe, rapidly reassembling into another Azure Avenger at a visible speed. This is your future ghost ship. Aside from not containing its original hidden specialties, everything else remains unchanged. The moment the gentle voice sounded, all the crew members and the newly built ghost ship by Bonoa disappeared, leaving only the Azure Avenger suspended in solitude. Although he knew that it couldn't be as effortless as it seemed, creating a ghost ship in a few breaths of time greatly impacted Alger's ingrained perceptions. He stared blankly at the scene, momentarily forgetting to respond. Klein, above the gray fog, also widened his eyes. With his true vision, he saw it even more clearly, and various thoughts immediately surfaced in his mind. An angel-level craftsman, Church of Steam, Klein scrutinized the unfamiliar angel, seeing the same brown hair and blue eyes as Bernadette, and a name that had appeared in Rosel's diary was on the tip of his tongue. Leaning back against the bronze high-backed chair, Klein, having confirmed his judgment, let out a long breath. His gaze towards this pair of siblings was tinged with a sense of melancholy, of things being different. His intuition told him that this was definitely related to Aaron. Not paying too much attention to Alger's shock, Bernadette glanced at Bonneva, who had already begun inspecting the Azure Avenger ship. A torrent of information gathered in her palm, materializing into a cerulean conch. Pure white, ethereal feathers grew from both sides of the conch, as if imbued with life. They flapped their wings, carrying specks of starlight, and actively flew into Alger's hand. This contains a wisp of my power, consider it compensation for taking the hidden treasure of this ghost ship. Besides being able to resolve some dangers you currently can't handle, it can also guide you to an omnis sea monster for your advancement. Before Alger could respond, brilliant bubbles surged from the conch, engulfing him and making him vanish from this sky forest. Bernadette took a step, arriving on the deck of the Azure Avenger. Her eyes, as blue as a condensed ocean, instantly became even deeper, briefly losing focus, as if peering into the torrent of fate. Behind her, a pair of almost transparent, peeping eyes emerged, their indifferent, lashless pupils overlapping with Bernadette's. Under the blessing of the two authorities, the vague and chaotic directions gradually became clear. At a certain moment, Bernadette saw a silver full-length mirror with intricate patterns and a very classical design. Congealed blood scabs covered the mirror surface, making it appear dim and lusterless. A tall figure seemed to be faintly discernible within. As if sensing Bernadette's gaze, the blood scabs peeled off layer by layer, revealing a man in blood-stained black armor with long, blood-red hair. His resolute and rigid demeanor contrasted sharply with the cruelty and madness filling his azure eyes. Almost the instant their gazes met, all the images completely shattered. Invisible pollution and the backlash of fate followed one after another. Bernadette's body swayed, her face paled slightly, and she whispered with a solemn tone. Alistair Tudor. Bonneva, sensing the power fluctuation, instantly appeared beside Bernadette. Without a word, he placed his hand on Bernadette's brow, suppressing and dispelling the frenzied will before speaking with a touch of helplessness. You're hundreds of years old, why are you still so reckless? Intimidated by his elder sister's aura, Bonneva wisely stopped the topic. He lightly coughed, withdrew his hand, and looked around, commenting from a craftsman's professional perspective. Very crude refining technique, entirely reliant on the support of high-level authority from residual power. At least there's a weather warlock characteristic or corresponding sealed artifact carrying Alistair Tudor's lingering will. Withdrawing her disdainful gaze from Bonneva, Bernadette felt the lingering warmth on her brow, her lips subtly curving. She interpreted the information she had just glimpsed and added. The seal here should also be affected by the Black Emperor Pathway's twisted authority, and it clearly exhibits characteristics of utilizing error, changing positioning, and grafting space. The siblings exchanged glances, both feeling it was tricky. Using such a clever method, it wouldn't be difficult for them to find the entrance with their authority, but they couldn't guarantee that forcibly breaking in wouldn't damage or lose the treasures, or trigger corresponding chain reactions. Bernadette pondered for a moment, then immediately took out various spiritual materials and began setting up a sacrificial ritual. After the long, muffled prayers, the materialized dark gold double doors slowly opened. The Azure Avenger vanished into the boundless dark gold mist. South of the Backland region, on the north bank of the surging Tussock River. Looking at Raft Pound, who was completely parasitized, and the text simultaneously translated on Rhodes's mirror surface, Aaron curled his lips. He was beyond complaining about these persistent almonds, like stubborn plasters. He even imagined Raft Pound completing the iron-blooded night ritual with a group of almonds. At the same time, a faint prayer reached Aaron's ears. His expression shifted slightly. He manipulated the subconsciousness left in the nation of disorder to respond to the prayer, pondered for a moment, then grabbed Rhodes with one hand and left without hesitation. This was not the only bloodline of Tudor. There was no need to get involved with Aemon again. Moreover, with the Nation of Disorder's uniqueness, he could even forcibly open Tudor's treasure. Backland, a certain underground hall. Raft Pound, looking up at a certain spot, curled his lips. He retracted his gaze and raised a hand to pinch his monocle. Behind him, flames, some crimson, some fiery white, some orange-yellow, surged from the entrance, forming a figure. This figure wore black, blood-stained armor and had shoulder-length fiery red hair. He was young and handsome. A banner-like blood-red mark grew on his brow, and the mockery on his face was undisguised. It was Red Angel, Medici, who had returned from the forsaken land of the gods. What a boring trick. I've long said this is meaningless. Seeing that Aemon had no reaction, Medici tutted and continued. Where's your true body? I got some interesting things from the memory of the Iron and Blood Cross Order's leader. Tisk, but this might require your help. After hearing Medici's words, Aemon scratched his chin, guessing what he wanted to do, and chuckled. Just because that fellow from the forsaken land of the gods helped you balance the pollution doesn't mean everything's fine. Rashly touching the things beneath Trier, the paranoiac can't save you before he truly becomes a visionary. As for my true body, Tisk, unluckily, I ran into little Zeratul. To celebrate his escape from the knight's imprisonment, we naturally have to have a good chat. Watching the playful smile on Amon's face, Medici curled his lips and directly left Backland with this Aemon clone. He had already incorporated the remaining Iron and Blood Cross Order and begun to reforge the War's Red Army, which was also key to maintaining the pollution's balance. Above the gray fog, Klein looked at Mr. Hanged Man in the prayer scene, who was filled with complex emotions like apprehension and excitement, and sighed with some regret. No longer thinking about the lost Blood Emperor's treasure, and considering that it was not suitable to stay in the washroom for too long, Klein immediately sank his consciousness and returned to reality. Putting away the paper substitute, Klein turned on the faucet and began washing his hands. Immediately after, his movements suddenly paused, and he looked at the washroom mirror directly in front of him with a rather strange expression. Beneath the misty steam, a line of golden Loan characters abruptly appeared. Great Master, your loyal and humble servant Rhodes has finally caught up with your footsteps again. Have you missed your most loyal servant Rhodes? A series of vivid emoticons followed. This familiar fawning style made Klein's lips twitch slightly. He resisted the urge to cover his face and responded with a hum. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Klein glanced at Tingen, which was barely a silhouette in his peripheral vision, and his eyebrows slightly raised. He casually set up a wall of spirituality, feeling a sense of understanding. It must be the residual aura from Saphira Castle that Rhodes sensed. But I haven't even reached Backland yet. Can this mirror, sealed in the Church of Steam, still manage this? As thoughts flickered, Klein clearly felt the air around the washroom mirror suddenly flow, and a very fawning voice rang out. Great Master, I have escaped the foolish Church of Steam, but. Rhodes's neutral voice, which couldn't be distinguished as male or female, twisted a little, then cautiously added, it's just that due to some irresistible reasons, your most loyal servant Rhodes cannot immediately serve by your side at all times. However, I no longer have the previous restrictions and can respond to your summons at any time. It can even speak. It's more versatile than I imagined. It's not easy being a mirror these days. Klein's facial muscles twitched, suppressing the strange emotions in his heart, and looked at the complex pattern representing secrecy and prying eyes that appeared on the washroom mirror, along with the corresponding explanatory text. Great Master, this is a rune composed of corresponding symbols and magical sigils. You just need to draw it on any mirror, and it will notify me to come. Klein nodded thoughtfully. Although he still had some questions, considering he had already stayed in Saphira Castle for a long time responding to Mr. Hanged Man's prayer, Staying in the washroom for too long would attract too much attention, so he merely gave a plain, slight nod. After Rhodes left, he retracted the wall of spirituality and nonchalantly returned to his seat, gazing into the distance, where the land of hope, the city of all capitals, Backland, lay. Mist Sea, Lasha Island. A huge sailing ship was anchored in the harbor, its flag and eye surrounded by 10 stars, an eye without eyelashes. Scattered, brilliant starlight coalesced into a transparent long bridge. Katlia, dressed in a black classical long robe, leapt from the future, gazing at the magnificent castle made purely of emeralds not far away, her lips curling into a smile. Since her advancement to demigod, this was the first time the queen had actively summoned her back to Emerald City. Suppressing her inner excitement, Katlia walked towards the castle. She was not unfamiliar with this place, easily passing the inquiries and various tests of the gatekeeping golems, and arrived at the most open-air room with the best view inside the castle. Bernadette, who had quietly left Byam and returned directly using the fairy tale magic of mystical reenactment, stood behind the railing, gazing at the waves that rolled in. She casually tossed the somewhat timid craftsman Sharf to Katlia and said, "This is Sharf's descendant. He will stay on the future from now on." Before Katlia could speak, light gathered in Bernadette's hand, forming a miniature book that shimmered with strange patterns and bizarre numerical symbols. The cover of the book was clearly Rosal, holding a glass lamp, exploring alone. The Hermit card. An angel of the Moses ascetic order has fallen. This secret organization and the evil god behind it will never let it go. Bernadette waved her hand, and the Hermit card quickly collapsed to the size of a normal tarot card, suspended before Katlia. "This blasphemy card is of little use to me now, but it seals the power of an angel, which is enough to help you deal with many situations." Katlia did not reach for the blasphemy card in front of her, her deep purple eyes fixed on Bernadette. She pursed her lips and instinctively pressed, "Your Majesty, what are you planning to do?" Bernadette, with her chestnut hair casually draped, did not answer Katlia's question, but spoke in a calm voice, "You have gained divinity and found your own destiny, and I should also pursue mine." Bonaparte walked out of the study on the inner side, holding a stack of organized Rosal's diaries. Looking at the blasphemy card symbolizing his father's legacy, he then thoughtfully scrutinized Katlia, who stubbornly stood in place, unwilling to leave, and slowly said, "We will delve into the Mist Sea to search for father's traces, a long search that may take some time. This is not dangerous, it's just to ensure that we can arrive in time if you need help at a critical moment, which is why we specifically asked you to come to Lasha Island." With a gentle smile on his face, Bonaparte's fingertip touched the Hermit card, making the aura of this blasphemy card even more profound. He nodded slightly towards Katlia, who was full of surprise and had already realized his identity, and then sent her and Sharf out of the Emerald Palace together. "After being lost and found, your humanity is maintained better than I expected." A slightly praising voice came from the void, which attracted the attention of the two angels. Aaron, holding Rhodes in one hand, immediately appeared. His spirituality swept over the stack of Rosal's diaries in Bonaparte's hand, and Aaron's lips curled slightly as he continued playfully, "Believe me, you absolutely do not want to know what is written in there." Bernadette, knowing that Aaron could decipher that unique script, could roughly guess that the diary happened to record one of her father's embarrassing moments. She lightly coughed, stopping the rather curious Bonaparte, and then let starlight gather into a miniature sea chart, before softly explaining, "This is a sea area far from safe passage that I roughly deduced using the sea charts provided by father's 4 horsemen descendants and my own prophetic abilities." Aaron scanned the starlit sea chart and looked at the magic mirror in his palm, saying, "Can you find or narrow down the search area?" "You know what I mean." On the surface of the ancient silver mirror, the water shimmered, and pale words were outlined, with a hint of panic. "Great Order Master, my rank is not high enough to directly probe places affected by that level of power." Immediately after, it followed its instincts and cautiously asked, "Can you forgive Rhodes's incompetence?" "Cannot directly probe, meaning it requires some medium," Aaron hummed thoughtfully, his expression unchanged, and looked at Bernadette and Bonaparte, who were staring at Herodes. Direct bloodlines possess symbolic and correlative significance in mysticism, and the higher the rank, the closer the connection can be, with countless secret prayer rituals based on this. By simply modifying the secret prayer ritual to direct the existence of the secret prayer towards the Order Master, Aaron could use the rank of the Nation of Disorder to strengthen Herodes and use the Sephira's aggregation instinct to pinpoint the location of Rosal's last mausoleum. As a warlock at the angel level, Bernadette clearly understood various mystical rituals. Almost simultaneously with Aaron's gaze, she immediately grasped Herodes's subtle meaning and acted upon it. A drop of translucent blood, containing numerous complex ethereal symbols, seeped from Bernadette's fingertip. Benoit, who was beside her, was a beat slower, but also raised his palm. The blood, imbued with many symbols and authorities, merged. Under Bernadette's control, a blood-colored eye of peeping was outlined on Herodes's rippling mirror surface. Feeling a certain order being pried open, Aaron's will connected to the Nation of Disorder, bringing the Black Emperor card into reality and covering it over the mirror. The Black Emperor card, completely assimilated by the Nation of Disorder, surged with tumultuous dark gold mist, instantly engulfing Herodes without giving it a chance to resist. After gaining the King of Angels' status by controlling the Nation of Disorder, Aaron could already use some of the Black Emperor pathway's authority. By bribing Herodes with the Black Emperor card, Aaron, or more accurately, the Nation of Disorder dominated by his will, established a parasitic, one-way connection with Herodes. Using the authority of the Hand of Order to modify and add rules, Aaron, after further twisting and strengthening this connection, unhesitatingly drew upon the power of the Nation of Disorder. Under the terrifying directed aggregation of the Sephira and the guidance of the bloodline, amidst Herodes's convulsive moans, the shadowy curtain covering reality was lifted. An island comparable in size to Bansi Island was outlined in the mirror. Giant, deep green, almost black trees stood tall, covering the ground and obscuring the mountains, yet they abruptly stopped before a massive, towering black mausoleum. Found it. The depths of Aaron's eyes turned completely golden, and the crown of stars quietly appeared above his head. The ethereal blue light, amplified by the surrounding rules, instantly surged forth. The Emerald Palace vanished the next second, completely unaffected by the distorted order. Aaron directly teleported, bringing Bernadette and Benoit to the edge of the primitive island. Almost as soon as they appeared, the entire primitive island began to boil, like a giant stone thrown into a still pool. Trees that almost obscured the sky surged like a tide, mixed with various deformed monsters. Even when shredded by angel-level power, they continued to rush forward, one after another. Looking at the chaotic primitive island, Aaron put away Herodes, who looked as if it had been squeezed dry, and snapped his fingers. A layer of shadow fell upon Bernadette and Benoit behind him. At the same time, the surging tide abruptly stopped, as if losing its target, quickly dissipating and returning to stillness. Chaos gives birth to order, and order inherently carries shadows. Our arrival broke the balance within. As a loophole, we naturally need to be repaired by order, and this only requires a slight distortion of the rules. After casually explaining the previous anomaly and cautioning Bernadette not to use divination here casually, Aaron looked at the primitive island with keen interest. Only by truly arriving here could he clearly feel that the underlying rules of this place had been completely twisted and chaotic. Here, the endpoint of death does not connect to eternal slumber, but to a new beginning. Moreover, this was not the kind of resurrection of the death pathways, undying, but a rebirth, with a certain will and vitality, mixed with some of the Black Emperor's distorted order of resurrection. Heeding Aaron's warning, Bernadette did not act rashly on her own, but through the secret prayer ritual linked by blood, she and Benoit almost simultaneously cast their gaze towards the black mausoleum deep within the island. Their gaze lingered for a long time on the various inscribed texts and symbols, as well as the heavy stone door, nearly 30 meters high, seemingly prepared for a giant. They had already recognized that these were many decrees formulated and promulgated by their father. Raising a hand to stop Bernadette, who was unconsciously stepping forward, Aaron, who had already observed the entire primitive island with his true vision, explained with a smile. He seems unwilling for you to see him as he is now, so you two should remain here for the time being. As his voice fell, without waiting for their response, the shadows on Aaron's body rippled, transmitting intonated syllables into the mausoleum. We finally meet, Mr. Huang Dao. He used pure Chinese. As Bernadette subconsciously tried to decipher the strange syllables, the grand mausoleum door suddenly opened a crack. A dense shadow flashed and disappeared, and with it, Aaron, standing with his hands behind his back, also vanished. Inside the slightly dim, black emperor mausoleum, dark black walls surrounded a central high platform of the same color. Upon the high platform rested a giant's chair, seemingly crafted from black iron and inscribed with intricate, twisted patterns. The top of the chair's backrest extended upwards into the shape of a crown. At this moment, a huge black shadow sat on this heavy chair. Its face, composed of pure shadow, split into two openings through which a blood-red light could be directly seen. A dry, hoarse voice echoed in this twisted space shrouded in shadows. You've finally come. This status should be the Sephira recorded in the blasphemy slate. Shadows mixed with dark gold mist spread out like a tide, covering the constantly cracking blood-colored fissures on Russell's body. After helping his nominal countrymen stabilize his precarious state, Aaron looked at the former Intis emperor, who had an Aaron named after him, and chuckled softly. You don't seem surprised. The crimson light instantly dimmed a few shades. Russell, whose condition had stabilized considerably, first turned his head to look in a certain direction. After a few seconds, he chuckled with a dry, hoarse voice. I originally had some questions, but the moment I saw you, I understood. Although you shouldn't have brought them, regardless, I still want to thank you on behalf of Benoit and Bernadette. At this point, Russell paused, as if finally remembering something, and asked further. What about the wishing lamp? The lamp spirit inside has quite a background. With a slight upturn of his lips, Aaron responded indifferently. That fellow was struck by a sword from the god of combat for me last time and was severely injured. I have sealed it now. As he spoke, he retrieved the Truncest brass book from the Nation of Disorder. A pale golden light illuminated the surroundings. Holding this terrifying sealed artifact formed from a uniqueness, Aaron looked at Russell, who had returned to a normal human size, and got straight to the point. You should know that to alleviate your current predicament, you can only accept another compatible contamination of the same level, forming a certain balance. Feeling the mother goddess of depravity's corruption draw near, and with Aaron's intentional indulgence, Truncest's brass book became increasingly active. As silver-colored words appeared one by one on the turning brass book, above the high platform, at the center of the giant's chair inscribed with complex, twisted patterns. Russell's body became more real, and the shadowy veil that had originally enveloped reality transformed into a dim cloak, covering the constantly reborn crimson cracks on his body. With a hint of crimson still staining his eyes, Russell looked at his body, and said with a complex tone. Although it's only a brief moment of quiet and clarity, to be able to achieve this without advancing to sequence 0, it seems you have truly mastered that Sephira. Shifting his gaze to Truncest's brass book in Aaron's hand, Russell, as the creator of the 22 blasphemy slate, already realized something and chuckled with a hint of emotion. My life has been half success, half failure. I originally thought the most I could do was to imprison myself here, letting that being's corruption be buried with me. I never expected to be able to illuminate the path for future generations now. Already knowing Russell's choice, Aaron nodded, his figure merging into the shadow of order, leaving only an echo. The temporarily constructed balance can hold for another 5 minutes. Go see Bernadette and Bonneva. This is my promise to them. After 5 minutes, recite my honorific name. The origin of order and shadow. The great emperor of the chaotic kingdom. The lord of order who wields rules. Without lingering to disturb, Aaron's figure appeared above the primitive island. It wasn't until Russell's magnificent and unrestrained prayer echoed in his ears, and until Bernadette and Bonneva, their tear stains not yet wiped away, were sent out of the mausoleum. That dense dark gold mist erupted from him, spreading outwards. Under the projection of the Nation of Disorder's power, a magnificent miniature world emerged behind him, instantly engulfing the entire island. Pillars reaching up to the sky, like pillars supporting the entire world, stood around the island. At the end of the sky pillars, directly above the miniature world, Aaron, wearing a 9-layered crown, had endless chains of order extending from his back, piercing through reality and illusion, disappearing into the brilliant star, symbolizing Russell, which was rising slowly. The brass book, which had been held in his hand, also turned to its last page at this moment. The dense silver words had been repeating the same sentence from beginning to end. No rebirth allowed here. The already riddled underlying rules, eroded by the Black Emperor's distorted order, were instantly replaced by this decree, inscribed throughout the entire brass book, at the moment of this Justiciar pathway uniqueness's complete activation. On the huge, iron-black chair, Russell's body twisted and expanded. Specks of crimson moonlight flew from various parts of the primitive island, continuously gathering around Russell to form a miniature crimson moon-like entity, violently resisting the underlying rules modified by the brass book. The brass book, suffering from the backlash, dimmed significantly. Before new rules could emerge, Aaron, at the end of the sky pillars, seemed to distort distance, grabbing the sealed artifact formed by this uniqueness and pressing it against his glabella. Without any hesitation, no longer suppressing the craving deep within his spirituality, amidst the trembling of the entire nascent divine kingdom, he began to accommodate this uniqueness. Ever since he snatched the brass book back from the god of combat's church, he had already decided to use Russell to complete a simplified version of the God Ascension ritual to accommodate the uniqueness. And the God Ascension ritual provided by the blasphemy slate was to permanently modify a world's underlying rule, and then use this rule to judge a true God, powerfully suppressing their authority and power, and implementing one's own order. The special nature of the brass book dictated that when it activated to a certain degree, it would truly modify the world's underlying rules. Aaron only needed to fuse the uniqueness at this moment, which was equivalent to completing the first step of the ritual. In the mausoleum enveloped by crimson moonlight, Russell's body twisted and deformed, but the blood red deep within his eyes was replaced by pure dark gold radiance. With Aaron's help, Russell had already established a connection with the Nation of Disorder through prayer. Chains of order vibrated, and he finally looked at Bernadette and Bonneva, who were isolated and protected at the edge of the dark gold world. He did not choose to walk out of the mausoleum and revive in the astral world, that would only cause the apocalypse to arrive in reality prematurely. The next second, this man who called himself Caesar, raised his right hand, clenched it into a fist, and gently twisted his wrist. Strengthen. He forcibly completed a strengthening of Truncest's brass book's rules, based on his own authority, the special connection between the Black Emperor pathway and the Nation of Disorder, and the two types of corruption deeply eroding his body and soul. Russell's peak aura suddenly plummeted, and the constantly reborn crimson instantly stiffened, like a frozen picture. Aaron, who had been observing the changes in order, seized the opportunity Russell created with all his might, using the Nation of Disorder to forcibly suppress the constantly resisting uniqueness that had merged into his body. The strange wolf-headed, snake-bodied statue, which had been resting on the wishing divine lamp, flew out from the pile of sundries. In the peaceful and silent atmosphere, a colorless drop of liquid with a strong aura of eternal stillness quietly appeared, falling towards Russell, who was stiff and enveloped in crimson. The crimson it first touched violently collapsed, and the will of the mother goddess of depravity contained within it passively entered a state of eternal slumber. All rebirth completely ceased at this moment. Feeling an indescribable tranquility, Russell, just before his consciousness fell into eternal slumber, curved his lips and sighed softly. The future is yours. Before he could respond, just as Russell disintegrated into a mass of shadow mixed with a hint of crimson, the Justiciar uniqueness, which had been fiercely resisting within Aaron's body, trembled slightly, completely conceptualizing and merging into the dark gold mist, becoming an extension of his will. An indescribable sense of completeness immediately emerged in his heart and resonated throughout the entire nation of disorder. A true God is unique. After accommodating the justiciar pathway's uniqueness, he himself possessed the symbol of this pathway. The nation of disorder, having reclaimed the corresponding symbol and authority, was further perfected. Thanks to the continuous cleansing of the brass book remaining within the nation of disorder during this time, the spiritual imprint originally contained within it had been largely eroded. Although he had just accommodated the uniqueness and become a true king of angels, his state did not decline in the slightest. Putting the strange statue, borrowed from the Evernight goddess and containing a tributary of the river of eternal darkness, back into the pile of sundries, Aaron glanced at the genie feigning death. Rules were re-modified one by one, and the cracked lamp body became even dimmer, the unwilling screams fleeting. Aaron, who was about to continue exploring using the connection between the genie and the uncertain mist, paused slightly, looking at the real world through the dark gold mist that filled the sky. In the daytime sky, the crimson, blood-like moon suddenly became prominent, eclipsing the sun and making all continents, oceans, and islands seem to be draped in a scarlet and sinister veil. The crimson light simultaneously illuminated the invisible barrier within the astral world, lighting up all the distorted concepts there. At the same instant, the sun in the astral world, like a child's scribble, suddenly burst into flames, turning into a scorching golden, terrifying fireball, confronting the crimson full moon outside the invisible barrier, along with other, awakened, symbols. The pure and sacred golden light immediately permeated reality, dispelling the rapidly rising feminine tide. Aaron merely glanced at the chaotic astral world before withdrawing his gaze, though the initial barrier was on the verge of collapse, with the seven gods repairing and supporting it. At least for now, the worst-case scenario wouldn't occur, which was also the basis for his confidence in daring to provoke and eliminate the mother goddess of depravity's hidden moves. After re-suppressing the wishing lamp, Aaron looked at the strange, black-red intertwined shadow in the still-standing black mausoleum. As his gaze shifted, immense power converged, and using the prayer star symbolizing Russell, Aaron bestowed grace upon Russell in eternal slumber, allowing the nation of disorder's corruption to continuously erode and replace the crimson that had ceased its new birth. Suppressing the instinctive resistance of the mother goddess of depravity's corruption, which had also fallen into eternal slumber, one by one, chains of order, faintly inscribed with Mercury words, from Aaron's divine kingdom, which overlapped with reality behind him, pierced through this primordial island. The concepts of weight and distance were distorted. This island, comparable to Bansi Harbor, now seemed like a light feather, instantly dragged up and disappearing into the thick dark gold mist. Watching the deep blue, almost black seawater surge in from all directions below, filling the vast vortex formed by the downward collapse, Aaron looked at the dispirited Bernadette and Boron and calmly said, "Temporary separation is for a better reunion. At least, compared to vague waiting, I can give you a tangible hope." Before the two angels could respond, the spreading dark gold mist instantly contracted, enveloping all figures and disappearing under the gaze of that terrifying presence beyond the barrier. In the unknown land filled with digital mist, streams of transparent, illusory information, tainted with barely visible crimson, intertwined and converged. Countless black and white eyes rotated rapidly within them, each condensing into illusory and complex symbols, simultaneously casting their gaze upwards, towards the blood-colored moon that had dyed the world crimson. Watching the enormous blood moon projected onto the invisible barrier being expelled and obscured by the scorching sun and other symbols, the hidden sage, composed of complex information, trembled violently, transmitting his call. Great Mother! The surging insane thoughts transformed into a complex torrent of information, and influenced by the hidden sage's status and current state. At this moment, except for a few organizations like Oravi Island, which received the protection of other high-level existences, all beyonders of the mystery prior pathway heard this call deep in their minds, and the indiscriminate mad whispers instantly caused this terrifying pollution to spread in reality. The illusory and vague complex information collapsed in the next second, strangely leaving this digital world, and taking advantage of the chaos caused by the previous full pathway broadcast of whispers. he concealed all his traces, following the Great Mother's guidance to a world that stretched endlessly, seemingly forever shrouded in darkness. The biting cold wind seemed to affect the surrounding spirit world, but this held no meaning for the conceptualized, hidden sage. Ignoring the barrier formed by darkness and wind-driven snow, he looked deep into the Evernight plains, the crimson mixed in the information torrent slowly surging. Upon sensing the Great Mother's aura, a twisted monster like a mountain of flesh crawled out of a bottomless fissure, continuously spreading an ethereal blood mist, and blood-colored pupils split open on its writhing, distorted flesh, looking indifferently at the hidden sage. It was the former king of curses, now the beauty goddess, Baranka. I feel the Great Mother's call, she is summoning me, it is time. A sweet, soft, charming voice, mixed with terrifying curses, emanated from the center of Baranka's mountain-like colossal body. That face, indescribable in words, seemingly a convergence of all symbols of beauty in the world, formed a strong contrast with its deformed and ugly body. Streams of information containing numerous digital symbols peeled off from his body and merged into the surrounding void. As a high-level being with the concealment authority, he directly covered, modified, and hid all information in this specific area of the Everdark plane. Such consumption was no small burden for the hidden sage, who had just been injured in the Divine War ruins not long ago, but the rapidly newborn Crimson was like a mother's loving care, continuously helping him replenish his consumption. After concealing all information, the hidden sage looked back at Baranka, who had achieved the beauty goddess pathway through the Great Mother's grace, and spoke faintly. The Great Mother's will is being expelled from that barrier, although it has attracted the attention of the gods for us. The time we can gain is still limited, and I will cooperate with you with all my might. Baranka nodded slightly, his mountain-like body immediately leaned back, falling into the abyssal giant fissure behind him, carrying the hidden sage through the eternal darkness, and arriving at the bottom of the valley illuminated by crimson. The source of the crimson moonlight was 2 tarot cards hanging high in the sky. 2 portraits of Rissel in different feminine attire appeared even more eerie under the crimson light, carrying an indescribable sense of horror, like a pair of blood-red eyes overlooking reality. They were precisely the Mother card and the Moon card. Below the blasphemy cards, a group of Beyonders, from demigods to low sequence, were gathered. They were all followers of the primordial moon, excluding the shaman King Karaman, who had lost contact after entering the underworld, and some unfortunate ones who were annihilated before they could be transferred. All remaining foundations were here. Without the slightest hesitation, clumps of writhing flesh detached from Baranka's body, within the range covered by the crimson moonlight. This beauty goddess' flesh outlined a strange symbol, similar in some details to the Earth Mother Church's holy emblem but with a vastly different style, like a huge flesh altar, and those weak believers and he himself were merely sacrifices seeking grace. The believers enveloped by the flesh altar suddenly grew multiple reproductive organs, or were stained crimson, or their bellies swelled, with fetuses about to tear through the flesh and emerge. The physical distortions had no effect on them. Instead, they made them even more frenzied, and the chaotic roars slowly unified after Baranka's will merged, echoing for a long time. Great goddess of origin, mother of all things, filthy mother nest, your children implore your mercy. Amidst the spine-chilling, grand prayers, an altar built from flesh and blood slowly took shape. Within the complex information torrent of the hidden sage, crimson stood out, disintegrating into countless abstract numbers stained crimson, rapidly spreading towards the mother card and moon card suspended in midair. As a special existence formed by the activation of the uniqueness of the hermit pathway, his status far surpassed that of Rissel, who was merely the knowledge emperor back then. With his own authority and the mother goddess of depravity's grace, he could bestow more fundamental power upon the abstract knowledge contained within the blasphemy slates. Correspondingly, having received power beyond the sequence 0 level and from a non-adjacent pathway, he would enter a period of weakness for a considerable time afterward, a weakness that could not be alleviated by rebirth. The invisible vortex formed by the 2 blasphemy slates frantically absorbed the information torrent originating from the hidden sage's main body. Russell's image on the cards became increasingly real, but his face gradually blurred. The next second, a crimson moon, as if real, appeared high in the sky, while a mass of brown soil, covered in plants and various reproductive organs, plummeted sharply, falling towards the flesh and blood altar directly below. Almost simultaneously, on the surface of the blood-red full moon outside the astral world barrier, a distinct bulge suddenly shot upwards, as if the Earth's crust was violently active, instantly forming a mountain thousands or tens of thousands of meters high. The mountain writhed, resembling a bird's nest or a womb. It was the remaining part of the mother goddess of depravity's brood nest after being torn apart. Further away, a certain planet, always covered in white mist, trembled slightly, as if it were a signal. In the desolate universe, 7 other stars of different colors, crimson, gold, etc., suddenly erupted with extremely bright light, ignoring distance, projecting terrifying faces, difficult to describe with normal words, onto the cracked world barrier. The crumbling barrier blocked most of the attacks, and although the gods filling the gaps were prepared, they could only manage to seal off the astral world, preventing the disaster from spreading to reality. Even so, the most powerful mother goddess of depravity still managed to infiltrate some of her power with coordinated efforts from inside and out. Within a vibrant realm somewhere in the astral world, the plump deity holding an illusory infant suddenly looked somber, and then flowers and trees violently shot up from the ground. They intertwined with each other, layer upon layer, forming a natural barrier outside the realm that blocked all observation. Not far away, in another realm shrouded in eternal night, a blurry, indistinct figure emerged, adorned with countless starlight on a layered yet uncomplex black long dress. From her ribs and waist, 2 pairs of arms covered in dark black short fur grew out. 2 of these hands dragged a giant scythe made of gathered death intent, while the other 2 restrained a crimson moon that still seemed to be pulsating. Compared to the Earth Mother, who was directly affected by the mother goddess of depravity, the Evernight goddess merely utilized the symbol of the crimson moon, so the impact on her was limited. However, simultaneously suppressing 2 uniquenesses was an immense burden for her at this moment. Her beautiful and gentle face beneath the thin black veil showed no emotion. Her eyes seemed to condense a night sky filled with stars. She withdrew her gaze from the mother goddess of depravity outside the barrier and looked towards the eternal darkness plane in the real world. Realizing something, she violently swung the giant scythe in her hand towards the continuously restless, crimson moon. The moment the latter's vitality was extinguished by the all-consuming death intent, she stuffed it into the misty world held by her last 2 hands. All traces were completely hidden, but the mystical connection established by a status beyond the sequence level did not completely fail. In the depths of the eternal night plane, the red moon, suspended above the rift trembled slightly. All information torrents pointing to the moon's uniqueness were secretly stripped away, but they did not dissipate under the maintenance of some power. On the flesh and blood altar, which had been stained dark brown, space twisted irregularly, and deep red fissures appeared, vaguely revealing the thick gray-white mist behind them. The prayers seeking grace slowly subsided, replaced by increasingly uniform and grand heartbeats. As this sound reached its peak, a mass of flesh and blood, indistinguishable from a heart or a placenta, fell from the gray-white mist, instantly merging into the flesh and blood altar directly below. A much more illusory and weaker information torrent than before spread outwards. After the hidden sage cleared all traces, he instantly vanished, carrying the flesh and blood altar, which had transformed into a bloody flesh pupa, seemingly gestating something unknown. Only then did the terrifying faces on the barrier gradually recede, and the astral world stopped trembling only when the bulging mountain on the surface of the blood-red full moon collapsed again. The faint light symbolizing the god of steam and machinery surged from nothingness, leaving behind projected scenes throughout the astral world. Rather than repairing the cracks, it seemed more like seeking some special information. In the realm filled with twilight, the god of combat wore silver armor full of a sense of decay, and the orange-red light beneath his visor seemed to reflect the Evernight goddess holding aloft a giant black scythe. After a long silence, he slowly turned his head and looked at the realm of life, still shrouded by the natural barrier. Backland Greater Region, downstream of the Tussock River, ruin number 1. A curtain woven from shadows enveloped this deep, dark, and majestic secret mausoleum. George III, who had been observing the anomalies in the astral world from beginning to end, rose from his massive black throne. His body was already enveloped in a hazy shadow, seemingly not long before he could truly become the shadow of order. Withdrawing his gaze, he looked at the side of the throne, at the crown inlaid with numerous dark gems, symbolizing the uniqueness of the Black Emperor pathway. He murmured to himself with a subtle smile, "They need a Black Emperor." Backland East Borough. Amidst the whistle of the steam train, Klein adjusted his top hat, watching the hurried crowds with solemn expressions under the shadow of war. He expressionlessly carried his suitcase and quickly arrived at the nearest hotel. After paying the full amount in gold pounds, Klein politely declined the attendant's offer, casually picked up a newspaper from the front desk, and went to his room. During this process, his spirit body threads extended, and some inconspicuous animals were transformed into marionettes, secretly monitoring the surroundings. Sitting on the soft sofa, Klein recalled the crimson moon that had strangely appeared during the day. Although he did not know about the battle in the astral world due to the limitations of his status, he inexplicably felt irritable. As someone whose bizarro sorcerer potion was almost completely digested, he knew clearly that this was Saphira Castle warning his spirituality. Taking a deep breath, Klein went to the washroom and skillfully drew a complex pattern representing secrecy and prying on the mirror. After waiting a few minutes, just as he thought the magic mirror might have gone offline again, pale text finally rippled across the mirror's surface. In the northern district of Backland, the lights were dim, and it was quiet and peaceful. After the Nighthawks patrol team had gone far away, Klein walked out from the shadows of the alley, recalling the information subtly revealed in Rhodes's aggrieved complaints, and sighed softly. Whether it was Russell, or that existence which Rhodes claimed would lead to terrifying consequences just by understanding it, they were too distant for him currently. After satisfying his curiosity, it was time to visit his potential allies. His gaze swept over the attic behind the fence not far away. Klein snapped his fingers, and using flame jumping, he arrived inside a cozy bedroom. The slumber charm in his pocket simultaneously emitted a profound glow. Meeting the gaze of the infant in the cradle, who, with wide, clear black and white eyes, was completely unaffected by the charm, sucking his thumb and observing him, Klein politely and cautiously spoke first. "Excuse me, Mr. Speaker." The infant-like Will Ossepton hummed in response, and after adjusting to a more comfortable position, he continued with a hint of helplessness. "It's not an interruption, I wasn't in the mood to rest today anyway." Klein's heart stirred slightly, and he tentatively added, "Because of the blood moon this afternoon." Will Ossepton in the cradle replaced his answer with an expression that seemed to say, "You can be taught," then sighed and spoke softly. "I have a very bad premonition. The day of the apocalypse might be brought forward. There isn't much time left for you, and for me." Ignoring Klein's slightly changed expression, Will Ossepton extended his chubby hand and tossed over a paper crane that had been casually folded by his pillow, instructing, "Write text on it. As long as you are still in Backland, I will be able to sense it and pull you into a dream. Luck doesn't always favor you, so this can at least prevent you from attracting that blasphemer. Leave now. I will provide some assistance when necessary." Having received the desired promise, even though he had some doubts, Klein still bowed slightly, then took a step back and disappeared into the suddenly appearing flames. There were 2 other Tarot Club members in Backland. Before coming, he had already located their addresses from Rhodes, and these were all forces he could leverage. Witnessing Klein's disappearance, Will Ossepton looked out the window at the red moon, vaguely visible through the mist, and muttered softly with a resentful tone. Why was it so easy for that guy to accommodate the uniqueness? Fate is truly unfair to me. Sigh, I hope I don't choose the wrong side this time. If he can become the Lord of the Mysteries and steal my period of weakness, perhaps I really have a chance before the apocalypse descends. Across half of Backland, in the south of the bridge, inside an unmarked herbal shop. Wearing a black robe in the style of a rural witch doctor, the plump owner lay on the table with a conflicted expression, staring at a jelly-like object in front of him, entirely crimson, resembling a heart. A round-eyed owl perched on the nearby counter lowered its head, its wings spreading and then folding, its sharp voice echoing through the small shop. "Foolish Darkwill, that's 300 years of lifespan. Does being human really matter that much? Or are you worried about failing the advancement and turning into a hideous, ugly vampire? Also, don't always think about yourself. Where's my potion?" The plump apothecary Darkwill pushed away the chattering owl Harry and pouted. "Stupid bird, what do you know?" Although he said that, he still hadn't made up his mind. He carefully put away the vampire, Leander characteristic, his eyes involuntarily glancing towards the inner room, but unfortunately, due to the spiritual wall, he couldn't hear anything. Separated by a wall, in a spacious room that looked more like a warehouse, Emlyn observed the young man opposite him with interest, a slight curl to his lips as he emphasized the last two words. "I didn't expect Mr. Fate to already be sequence 5, but it won't be long before I can advance to Viscount." Although it was their first offline meeting, having gone through several tarot club gatherings, Admi Saul had already grown accustomed to Mr. Moon's Sunarate personality. He reigned in the spiritual energy that was constantly escaping due to his recent advancement and explained with a smile. "My past experiences were somewhat unique, so my potion digestion is different from ordinary people. It just so happened that my teacher successfully advanced to sequence 3, which helped me complete the advancement ritual. As for coming to Backland, this is the guidance of fate. The opportunity to obtain divinity is here. I hope Mr. Moon will take good care of me in the future." A marquee. Emlyn's eyes lit up, and he subconsciously applied the sanguine's internal power hierarchy, then nodded with considerable reserve. As expected of the force favored by Mr. Fool, the life school of thought indeed has profound heritage. "I just wonder if there are any sanguine count characteristics left." His thoughts couldn't help but wander. Before Emlyn could speak, his expression suddenly changed, and he and Admi Saul simultaneously turned to look at the full-length mirror on one side of the shelf. Ripples spread across the mirror's surface, and an invisible wind swirled within the spiritual wall. Despair Nightingale, Penetia, dressed in a simple white robe, stepped out of the mirror. Klein, in the guise of the mad adventurer Gehrman Sparrow, followed closely behind. The aura of two demigods permeated the enclosed space. Amidst the boundless, dark golden mist, a primitive island shrouded in shadow suddenly appeared. The prayer star symbolizing Russell fell from the sky, merging into the black mausoleum deep within the island. Floating in this strange world, Bonoa's face, unlike Bernadette's, showed undisguised astonishment on his first visit. Although the gods had moved their divine kingdoms to the astral world in the fifth epoch, high-ranking angels of the various Orthodox churches were unafraid of corruption and qualified to travel to the astral world. Feeling the comprehensive suppression of his authority and spirituality by the surrounding order, Bonoa even felt that this peculiar place, similar to a divine kingdom, was in some respects no less than the divine kingdom of the god of steam and machinery. Aaron, who had accommodated the uniqueness and truly become a king of angels, appeared before Bonoa and Bernadette holding the cracked, wishing divine lamp. Behind him, the Azure Avenger, that had been sacrificed into the nation of disorder earlier emerged. The mother goddess of depravity's corruption within Russell's body has only temporarily fallen into eternal slumber under the influence of the river of eternal darkness. If it continues to remain in reality, this fragile balance might collapse with just one full moon. Although I don't know why that one in the abyss has been unresponsive, there's no reason to guard against a thief for 1,000 days. Noticing the two gazes simultaneously directed at him, Aaron toyed with the wishing divine lamp in his hand and explained with a smile. A surging tide of power simultaneously dispersed outwards. Rules were rewritten or forbidden, and the Azure Avenger suddenly disintegrated into a cluster of brilliant starlight. Attracted by Aaron's actions, Bernadette, who had been gazing at Russell's black mausoleum, subtly changed her expression. A hint of silvery white flashed in her azure eyes. Her instincts as a clairvoyant made her sense the awakening of a terrifying will. Amidst the swirling starlight, one star radiance door after another was crushed. The various sealed artifacts stored within, along with their attached corruption, were utterly pulverized by a power that almost transcended the King of Angels level. Among the diverse spiritual light spots, wisps of madness, accompanied by a small amount of crimson blood distinct from crimson, reformed instantly, only to be swallowed by the silver full-length mirror, the sole survivor of the power surge. After accommodating the uniqueness, his integration with the nation of disorder deepened. The foundation for achieving godhood, the nascent divine kingdom that had merged with the remnants of the Night Emperor, had completely fused with the Sephira. This was also his confidence in daring to bring Russell directly to the Sephira. As for the Tudor treasure, without a bloodline, it would be forcibly opened through violence. In any case, the nation of disorder was isolated from reality, and the spatial turbulence formed by the high-level power of the door pathway could not banish anything. Glancing at the antique-styled, intricately patterned silver full-length mirror, Aaron quietly modified the rules within the nation of disorder. All the pulverized Beyonder characteristics reassembled almost instantly, with several demigod-level characteristics being drawn to land before Bonneva. Aaron's figure faded, reappearing before the full-length mirror. The mirror, having absorbed the residual aura, did not reflect his image. Only a massive, iron-black throne appeared in its deep surface. The surface of the throne bore patches of reddish marks. A giant figure clad in a dark red sacrificial robe and wearing an iron-black crown met Aaron's gaze from within the mirror. A strong aura of iron and blood, accompanied by a tangible terrifying pressure, erupted. The dense dark gold mist rippled but quickly returned to tranquility. It's merely a mental imprint preserved by the mirror world, and this, whether warlock, characteristic, possessing only the bare rank. Suppressing the anomaly with a flick of his hand, Aaron's lips curled into a sneer. Above the firmament, two praying stars suddenly brightened, and Valna, clad in classical full armor with red hair and brown eyes, was the first to emerge. He held a red priest card in one hand and a peculiar crown covered in rust and bloodstains in the other. The extremely dense aura of rust and slaughter made both Bernadette and Bonneva subtly turn their heads. Pales followed behind, sensing the extremely dangerous Sephira aura around him, comparable to outer god corruption. He looked around this world, comparable to a divine kingdom, with slight tension yet undisguised astonishment, silently murmuring in his heart. Is this a king of angels who controls a Sephira? How terrifying! He was an old noble from the fourth epoch, a contemporary of the fallen Zeratul, who had seen the blasphemy slate and fully experienced the War of the Four Emperors. Although the suppression this nation exerted on him still differed from what the Night Emperor of the fourth epoch had made him feel, it had already touched the level of a true god, without the inherent gap in power. Having been informed by Aaron in advance, Valna, who had adjusted his state to the best, solemnly scanned Alistair Tudor in the mirror. He unhesitatingly revealed his complete mythical creature form, transforming into a translucent crimson storm giant. His illusory face, flowing with lightning and fiery rain, split open to swallow the blasphemy card, while slowly placing the crown, which was essentially a sequence one conqueror characteristic, on his head. Without auxiliary materials, without a promotion ritual, the moment he attempted to accommodate it, the mental imprint from the Blood Emperor, solidified deep within this conqueror characteristic and impossible to remove, immediately began to stir, wanting to merge with Valna's spirit body. Aaron, constantly monitoring the changes in order, slightly raised his hand. A phantom velvet curtain descended from the firmament, enveloping both Valna and the full-length mirror. As if sensing a certain aura contained within the attendant of mysteries characteristic, the wishing divine lamp in Aaron's hand trembled slightly as if instinctively, and wisps of pale golden light emanated, strongly repelling anything approaching the curtain. That attendant of mysteries characteristic, which had been missing since ancient times. Pale's pupils contracted slightly. He took a deep look at the curtain, but his hands didn't stop. The phantom of an ancient, mottled clock simultaneously appeared behind him, and he raised his hand towards Valna, who was completely defenseless against him. The chains of order, interwoven and run through in the dark gold mist, trembled. Immense power, along with the change in rules, was added to Pale's. In just his first attempt, he successfully stole Valna's fate. Aaron's figure became ethereal. While mobilizing the power of the Nation of Disorder to suppress the Heavenly Venerable's will, which showed signs of awakening, he also urged the curtain, formed by the attendant of mysteries, Beander characteristic, grafting the future fate stolen by Pales for a period of time onto Alista Tudor in the full-length mirror. Aaron, who was equivalent to the rules themselves within the Nation of Disorder, used the shadow of order to actively create and magnify loopholes in the rules, allowing all theft and grafting to proceed exactly according to the most ideal plan. The Blood Emperor's mental imprint, which was about to merge with Valna's spirit body, also detached from the Conqueror characteristic under the rule-enhanced grafting and the influence of the Attendant of Mysteries, nascent authority of deception, returning to its more mystical, true body, Alista Tudor in the mirror. And Alista Tudor in the mirror, who simultaneously bore the fate of directly devouring a Sequence 1 characteristic, also fell into the madness brought by losing control at this moment. The next second, a hand entirely condensed from dark gold mist lifted the curtain, which had begun to stir, and directly covered the full-length mirror with it. The inward collapsing curtain glowed with points of gray-white. Without specific rule constraints, it instinctively created a nascent divine kingdom, transforming into a realm of mysteries to counter the Nation of Disorder, and its inherent hidden authority simultaneously sealed off the grafted fate. Only at this moment did the many angels present finally breathe a sigh of relief. Bernadette, who had witnessed the entire process, had countless streams of information flash deep within her eyes. Mystical reenactment, successfully recorded certain scenes. The flame giant, whose size had expanded again, slowly dissipated. After dispelling his mythical creature form, a crimson flag mark appeared on Valna's brow. Feeling the changes in his body, he spoke with some hesitation. Wouldn't this be too risky? Aaron's figure, holding the wishing divine lamp in his left hand and the full-length mirror in his right, reappeared. He looked at the somewhat stunned Valna and responded with a smile. This is a rare opportunity to get on the bus first and buy the ticket later. In my nation, the rule loopholes for theft and grafting will not be mended. And the Tudor in the mirror has absorbed the imprint from the Conqueror characteristic, supplementing his essence. The loss of control brought by directly devouring a Sequence 1 characteristic is within his acceptable range, given that he inherently possesses the essence of a true god. After all, he was already a lunatic. Varnar unconsciously caressed the mark of the flag banner on his brow, then lowered his gaze to feel his own condition, murmuring with a complex expression, "Is this what it means to be a Beander without destiny?" His current state was extremely peculiar. His uncontrolled destiny had been grafted onto Alista Tudor in the mirror, but the Conqueror characteristic had been successfully assimilated by him through a loophole in the order. He could clearly feel the elevation of his divinity and Beander characteristic, a state somewhat similar to an ancient sun god who had regained his sanity. Shortcuts always leave hidden dangers. Your current balance is entirely dependent on the rules within the Nation of Disorder. Once you return to reality, without the protection of secrecy, a Sequence 1 Beander without destiny's influence on the River of Destiny is enough to attract the attention of all high-level beings with authority in the domain of destiny. And a Beander without destiny is almost a lamb to the slaughter before them. One by one, the 12-segmented worm of time squirmed and reformed into Paulez's figure. He spoke in a low voice, his gaze already turning towards Aaron. Feeling the convergence of gazes, Aaron placed the silver full-body mirror, covered and enveloped by the mystical realm, not far from Russell's mausoleum, and responded calmly. The mental imprint of Tudor in the Conqueror characteristic has been cleared. The most troublesome issue has been resolved. All that's needed is to complete a simplified advancement ritual, ending the theft and grafting at the last moment of the ritual, and returning destiny. This will still be a complete advancement. I've already had Astolfo and Azek prepare. The Highland Kingdom and the Byron Kingdom will assist you in completing the ritual in the southern continent. Before everything is ready, you should stay in the Nation of Disorder and make the most of this window to digest some of the Conqueror Beander potion. I'll arrange everything else." Seeing that Aaron already had a plan, Pallas said no more. His thoughts wandered, and he suddenly sighed with a hint of regret. It was a pity that Mobit had advanced to Sequence 3 Mentor of Deceit too recently. Both his Beander potion digestion and his control over theft were too weak. Otherwise, an active destiny theft by a Sequence 1 angel would have been the most perfect Trojan horse of destiny advancement ritual. Roughly guessing what the old man by his side was thinking, Aaron glanced at him but said nothing. He turned to look at Bernadette and Bonoa, sensing the changes in the rules of the real world, especially the astral world, and spoke calmly. "The confrontation in the astral world has ended. I have cleared the aura of the original island attached to you. After returning to the real world, quickly refine those demigod Beander characteristics into mystical items." At this point, Aaron paused. After a moment of thought, 2 blasphemy slates appeared in his palm, clearly the Black Emperor card and the Judgment card. After he assimilated the uniqueness and further integrated the Nation of Disorder, he had already touched upon the power of the Sequence 0 level. These 2 blasphemy slates were no longer mere decorations to him. In the 5th epoch, as the various Sephira on the western continent gradually eroded their seals and infiltrated reality, he only needed to wait for the right moment. The most recent and practical opportunity was the return of Mr. Door, triggering the Door Pathways God Ascension ritual, during which all seals would temporarily fail or weaken. Although the blasphemy slates do not possess Beander characteristics, their Beander characteristic is high enough to fully receive the blessings of the Nation of Disorder. Compared to reluctantly sending an angel to the western continent to explore, risking the loss of Beander characteristics or contamination by other Sephira, it was clearly safer and more concealed to use the Beander characteristic of the Nation of Disorder to retrieve or bestow blessings. If he could mass-produce them, he could even have a certain number of dependents on the western continent in a short period, though they would likely be classified as a cult in another sense. This is something I can ask the Evernight goddess about. After all, wasn't the Evernight Church a subterranean cult during the ancient sun god's reign? Reigning in his increasingly wandering thoughts, Aaron bestowed the 2 blasphemy slates upon Bonoa and explained his idea of creating similar items. As an angel-level craftsman, Bonoa was extremely familiar with the blasphemy slates made by his father. He glanced at Bernadette, who was also somewhat surprised beside him, and then spoke after careful consideration. Father advanced from Knowledge Magister to Knowledge Emperor. The special nature of the blasphemy slates comes more from the latter's authority. With that Hermit card, I can make similar items, but the effect will likely be far from your expectations. Without the slightest hint of disappointment, Aaron's lips curved slightly. He looked up, as if through the boundless dark golden mist, towards reality, towards the astral world, and spoke with a majestic voice tinged with amusement. "Don't worry, you can make the containers first. As for the Knowledge Emperor, there should be a result very soon." Winter County, Amantha Mountains. Audrey, wearing a white dress with green trim, looked nervously at the valley ahead. Virtual personalities split off, entering the collective subconscious sea and standing by, constantly monitoring Alfred Hall, who was advancing to a demigod. The battlefield was cruel, but it also meant more opportunities. Melissa, who had already advanced to astronomer, and Zio, who had advanced to disciplinary knight even earlier, followed behind Audrey. Only Furs was idly teasing Susie. Zio watched particularly intently, afraid of missing any details. After all, she was also of the Justiciar pathway. Without warning, an invisible wave swept through, followed by a breathtaking pressure. However, this divine pressure had no effect on the ladies present. As members of the Tarot Club, even the most laid-back Furs had seen the great existence of the Fool. Only Susie, who had not joined the Tarot Club, had her golden fur stand on end and whimpered. Audrey. Fortunately, the pressure came and went quickly. Audrey's eyes flashed with obvious joy. Hearing Susie's whimper, she quickly came back to her senses, stroked her smooth golden fur, and gave her a comfort on her corresponding spiritual island. Steady footsteps came from the valley. Alfred, in black armor, walked out of the darkness. His brilliant golden hair hung casually, and his azure eyes still held a hint of gold. Alfred, slightly lifting her skirt, Audrey, with the still timid Susie, stepped forward first, a gentle and soft smile appearing on her face. The virtual personalities in the collective subconscious sea acted together to soothe Alfred's newly advanced, restless divinity. The golden light deep in his eyes slowly faded. Alfred lowered his gaze and felt for a moment. Then, with a hint of apology, he half knelt and stroked Susie's smooth golden fur, looking at his sister and murmuring with great emotion. A demigod is indeed a leap in life level. Second brother has finally caught up to you. The sanctuary under the night sky was filled with a peaceful and serene atmosphere, unaffected by the intense battle at the Amantha defense line. Instead, it complemented the cold red moon hanging high in the sky, illuminating the earth. It wasn't until Alfred successfully advanced that Aaron ceased his suppression of the spatial order, withdrew his gaze from Audrey, and turned slightly to look behind him. The darkness there surged, and the Pontiff of Darkness, Annabella, clad in religious vestments and wearing a triple crown, emerged from her hidden state. Her dark eyes fixated on Aaron, then suddenly constricted, and an uncontainable astonishment flashed across her serene face, which had been as still as an ancient well. "Good evening, Your Holiness." Aaron nodded in greeting, then looked at Annabella and went straight to the point. In the collective subconscious sea near Hedrak village in Eastchester County, there lurks a mind dragon that survived the second epoch. Its identity is somewhat special, and to avoid being affected by additional factors, I hope to receive the hidden sage's blessing. Annabella's expression grew complex. She slowly nodded, not even asking what she needed to do, and added in a clear, cold voice. "The Amantha defense line is still in a fierce struggle. I cannot leave the sanctuary for long. You can summon my historical projection when you need help. Additionally, after the astral world barrier showed anomalies this afternoon, I received an oracle. Under the influence of the mother goddess of depravity, a portion of the brood mother's power seems to have permeated from the Evernight plains in the far north. Please, your honored follower, pay attention to this." Brood mother. Aaron raised an eyebrow, somewhat surprised, and couldn't help but recall the Rose school of thought angel who had advanced across pathways to become the beauty goddess. After a moment of contemplation, he flipped his hand, retrieving Erodes from the nation of disorder, and immediately inquired. What happened in the Evernight plains? Erodes, who had been dormant, suddenly awoke. The mirror surface trembled with ripples, but after a moment, no image appeared. Only lines of silvery words emerged, directly expressing the mirror's annoyance. The spirit world information corresponding to the depths of the Evernight plains has been completely concealed by the evil god worshipped by the Moses ascetic order. Your incompetent but loyal servant, Erodes, has disappointed you again. As expected, the hidden sage. Aaron's eyes narrowed slightly. He casually altered Erodes's questioning rules and put it away. He then glanced at Annabella beside him but did not immediately take out the item of contact given by the god of steam and machinery. Gazing at Audrey in the valley, Aaron pondered for a moment but decided to go alone. An angel-level mind dragon was also connected to the dragon of imagination, which was too dangerous for Audrey, who was only at sequence 4. With this thought, the star crown instantly appeared above his head, and the ethereal blue starlight portal carried his figure away. Storn City, the capital of Eastchester County. Aaron stepped out of the Star Gate, surveying the city under the crimson moonlight. His consciousness connected to the nation of disorder, and he retrieved a dark gold light cluster from the pile of miscellaneous items, bringing it into reality. The solidified power of order loosened, revealing a peculiar special symbol woven from numerous illusory and complex pieces of information. Aaron's spirituality stirred, as if sensing a gaze descending from the astral world. After imbuing this creation with a spiritual light containing Erodes and his own conjectures, he reabsorbed it into the Sephira. Putting the matter of the Evernight plains out of his mind, the ring of mysteries on Aaron's finger emitted a faint glow. Recalling Ins Zangwil's death on the Sea of Fog, he extended his hand, continuously grasping at the void in front of him. Repeating it again and again, his right hand suddenly sank, pulling out a slightly dim ancient quill. 008. While Grossel's travels would have been more suitable, the negative personality of the Dragon of Imagination, born from the influence of the Chaos Sea and lurking in the collective subconscious sea within its book world, made it impossible to reproduce through historical projection. Feeling the time limit he could maintain, he took out a Rhodes again and, using his finger as a pen, wrote the honorific name he had been told in Winter County on the mirror surface. The creator of ancient Hermes language. The light of enlightenment for human civilization. The discerner of dreams and minds. Ripples spread from the mirror surface, extending to the surrounding collective subconscious sea and sweeping towards the deeper islands of consciousness. In a secret mausoleum somewhere in East Chester County, illuminated by the faint glow of underground moss and the pillar lamps inside the cliff walls, an ordinary-looking elder floated in midair. It was Hermes. This ancient angel lowered his eyes slightly, using the cognizer's ability to grasp a loophole in the shadow of order. With his index finger, he outlined lines of shimmering light in the air, as if they came from the deepest dreams. In an instant, a Hermes, identical in every respect, quietly appeared. For an angel-level dream weaver, weaving a nearly real self that would not be detected by the rules permeating the mausoleum that the true body had left was not difficult. Clutching the historical void image of 008, Aaron immediately saw layers of grayish-white steps extending from the hazy sea surface to his feet the moment he entered the collective subconscious sea. With a slight curve of his lips, Aaron snapped his fingers. Using the high-level authority of the Black Emperor pathway granted by the Sephira, distance was distorted, and he instantly arrived at the Mind Island at the end of the steps. Aaron did not deliberately suppress his aura. After demonstrating his strength to this ancient angel, he raised the 008 in his hand and said with a smile, "Good evening, Elder Hermes, I am here to fulfill my previous promise to you." Twisted symbols appeared deep within Hermes's eyes. He stared at Aaron for a few seconds. The feedback from the discerner's authority was an endless dark gold world, and under the frantic premonition of his spiritual intuition, he decisively stopped all attempts to probe. Subconsciously comparing Aaron to the one from the Twilight Hermit Order, Hermes sighed softly with considerable emotion. In an instant, he composed himself and spoke calmly. "Your growth has exceeded my expectations. I have explored many of the dream labyrinths hidden in Hedrak during this time. I shall lead out that mind dragon, and with your current Beander characteristic, you should be able to block its retreat." Seeing Aaron nod in agreement, Hermes did not hesitate. Star-like points of light rose from the hazy collective subconscious sea, converging into the figure of a young man. Looking at this separated virtual personality, under Aaron's slightly surprised gaze, a tarot card suddenly appeared in Hermes's hand. The cover depicted Russell with a solemn expression, while in the upper left corner, brilliant starlight condensed into a line of text. Sequence 0. Visionary. After integrating this blasphemous card, which possessed nearly true God-level anti-divination and anti-prophecy capabilities, into the virtual personality, the young man's figure became even more solid and indistinguishable from a real person, showing no sign of being merely a separated identity. At the same time, in the gray, subconscious sea, a desolate island of mind materialized under the feet of the young man who had been separated. After clearing all traces, Hermes finally looked at Aaron, who had an unusual expression, and gently explained. "Russell and I are acquaintances. That blasphemy slate was the reward for ensuring Bernadette's safe departure from Intis back then. If you want it, I can give it to you after this matter is concluded." A sense of déjà vu, like a pledge of allegiance, Aaron clicked his tongue inwardly, then smiled and shook his head. "That won't be necessary. I'm just curious about the subsequent potion formulas of the spectator pathway. You can lend them to me for a look when the time comes." While responding, Aaron, whose aura was rising layer by layer, used the boost of the law to control the historical projection of 008 in his hand and wrote a passage on the island of mind. The mind dragon, Arahog, sensing the residual power of the quill of Alzuhad, will encounter this body in the dream maze due to the influence of instinctive aggregation. The gray-white text vanished into invisible ripples, transmitting towards the depths of the collective subconscious sea. The semi-illusory quill seemed to have completed its mission, completely dissipating even though the historical projection itself had not yet run out of time. In the blurry, gray world, streaks of light and shadow swayed and drifted, densely overlapping to form a deep, illusory sea. Everyone possesses divinity and is constantly eroded and influenced by the collective subconscious sea. The collective subconscious sea, inherited from generations of human accumulation, carries the deepest cognitions and impressions, which is why this gray world is filled with chaos and madness. Within this gloom, shrouded in mist, clear and ethereal dreams were like stars dotting the night sky. As light and shadow flickered, the outlines of some objects quickly emerged. A giant stone pillar, dozens of meters high, stood tall, with a slender, lizard-like monster perched atop it. Its body was covered in large, gray-white stone-like scales, and its eyes were pale gold and vertical. It was none other than the mind dragon, Arahog, lurking deep within the dream maze. Without warning, its two wings unfolded, their frames like metal or leaf veins, covered in gray, mysterious patterned membranes, almost obscuring the entire space. Arahog, with its large, gray-white scales, ignored the dream maze it had spent a long time constructing beneath its feet. Its pair of pale gold, indifferent vertical eyes peered through the hazy ocean to see a city of mind standing in the collective subconscious sea, and within it, the bone church at its center. As if some memories had been stirred, the entire dream trembled. Arahog let out an angry growl, and blurry light figures detached from its body, merging into the surrounding dream fragments, activating the preset barriers. With a ripple of its gray membrane, Arahog had already left the dream it had been hidden in, quickly fleeing towards the deepest part of the collective subconscious, using the interference of the barriers and the complexity of the dream maze. After violently crashing through a mental doorway, Arahog's massive body paused slightly, somewhat surprised to meet the gaze of a pair of indifferent and peaceful eyes. In the brief moment of its daze, the figure that happened to be blocking Arahog's escape path suddenly collapsed inward. The visionary card appeared in a vortex of light particles, and a passage connecting to outside the dream maze was woven. Arahog's breathing intensified slightly. Realizing something, it no longer hesitated. The top of its head turned dark, revealing a sea that encompassed everything, difficult to describe in words. A gray-white giant dragon, occupying half of the sea, leapt out, carrying a suffocating sense of oppression. Before Hermes's figure could fully appear, it charged towards the passage made of light. One of its vertical eyes was pale gold, the other a vivid red. The moment it left that sea, a third eye opened on its brow, as if containing dense shadows, seeming to want to stir a certain will deeply embedded in the collective subconscious sea outside the dream maze. It was none other than Anquelt, the dragon of imagination, after being corrupted by the chaos sea. The instigator, Arahog, seemed to have its eyes tinged with a hint of madness as well. It decisively broke free from this dream, but what came into view was not the expected collective subconscious sea, but a dark golden world. Aran hovered above the spiritual sky, mobilizing the power of the nation of disorder, and using the anchor provided by Hermes, forcibly pulled Arahog, who was trying to escape, and the surrounding dream maze into his divine kingdom projection. Having severed the connection with the subconscious sea and blocked the retreat, Aran ignored Arahog, who was fighting like a cornered beast. He raised an eyebrow and looked at the Eden, standing majestically not far away, halting the summoning of Annabella's historical projection. As early as when the 008 projection suddenly disappeared, he had anticipated Adam's arrival. Now, he could more clearly sense that the chaos in the subconscious sea had quietly dissipated, or more accurately, had been devoured. Manipulating the rules of this sea of consciousness, Aran narrowed his eyes and instantly arrived at the center of the mind city, before the majestic bone church. The black doorway, built from piled skeletons, was open. The grand, empty interior of the hall seemed deserted, with only a giant cross remaining. But under his true vision, the space within the bone church was a mix of real and illusory. The magnificent city supported by giant stone pillars instantly reminded Aaron of the City of Miracles, Levhid, which he had once explored. The sound of a book closing echoed. Levhid suddenly collapsed. Adam, holding Grossel's Travels, stood alone at the bottom of the cross. His clear, infant-like eyes showed no emotional fluctuations as he gently looked at Aaron, who was standing at the entrance of the bone church, neither asking nor urging. Aaron's gaze was fixed on Grossel's Travels, which was completely different from before. The line of ancient Fusik on its dark brown cover had disappeared, replaced by a half-open bronze door. In the faintly revealed deep darkness, a cold pupil with deep black eyes and countless dark blue cracks was vaguely visible. Feeling the abnormality coming from the nation of disorder, Aaron took a deep look at Adam, then asked with great certainty but undeniable doubt. Is this the primordial God Almighty? Are you using Arahog and the collective subconscious sea to gather his will? Adam, dressed in a simple white robe, shook his head and calmly replied. To be precise, this is merely the negative personality left behind after Anquelt's demise, a mental remnant formed after the primordial will, transmitted by the chaos sea's pollution, was assimilated over a long period. Glancing at Adam, who avoided the second question, Aaron couldn't quite guess what this fellow was trying to do. He probed subtly. Like the Vice King of Heaven, Dark Angel Saucerer, after the Cataclysm. To some extent, the nation of disorder replaced the Divine Kingdom, which allowed Aaron to access authority that only a Sequence 0 Justiciar could possess, even though he was merely a Sequence 3. The Night Emperor back then should have had a projection of the entire Truncest Empire within his Divine Kingdom. The collapse of order brought about by the Empire's demise was very likely the reason for the fall of this Justiciar. But if Lilith could leave behind a Divine Kingdom, what about the Night Emperor? If I could obtain the Night Emperor's Divine Kingdom, even just a fragment, I would likely benefit greatly. Calming the surging thoughts in his mind, Aaron looked again at the gradually solidifying Moon City, and at High Priest Nim standing at the forefront. Although he couldn't truly use this authority yet, he wanted to test an idea of his own through this medium. With a slight shift in his thoughts, the domain of judgment immediately enveloped High Priest Nim, and dark gold chains seemed to connect reality with illusion. In the forsaken land of the gods, within the Moon City's council hall, High Priest Nim calmly looked at Bruce and the other elders, speaking gently. After the Lord's holy day ends, many members of the Moon City hunting team reported today that their potions have been fully digested. This is the Lord's grace. All inventory of Beander characteristics and materials will be allocated to the maximum extent possible. The Lord will surely. Just then, his words suddenly stopped. A dense, profound darkness surged from behind him, spreading outwards like tentacles. This was a sign of his spirituality suddenly rising and his power becoming somewhat uncontrollable. However, as an experienced nightwatcher, Nim quickly regained control of his power. In a trance, he seemed to see a magnificent figure shrouded in dark gold mist. Indeed, Aaron retracted the domain of judgment, and High Priest Nim, who had been tinged black, returned to normal. Having observed through the light of faith, he had verified his idea. Since the Beander characteristic he hunted when advancing to Chaos Hunter was a living Duke of Entropy characteristic, Aaron's current domain of judgment also carried some authority of entropy transformation. The power that caused Nim's spirituality to surge originated from this. Although he couldn't directly modify the underlying rules, he could cast this weakened version of divine descent within the Divine Kingdom. This kind of distance-ignoring enhancement was clearly not an ability a Sequence 3 could possess. At least, it was something a Sequence 2 or even a Sequence 1 could achieve after possessing a nascent Divine Kingdom. Aaron felt himself. Perhaps because he gained this ability by utilizing the Nation of Disorder, the spiritual energy consumed was almost equivalent to summoning a historical void projection of a Sequence 4 of the same level. Aaron could hardly imagine the grandeur of the Truncest Empire in its most glorious period, where simply standing on its territory would grant one the favor and blessings of its rules. Bringing his thoughts back, Aaron pondered on Moon City, which he had just observed. The residents whose potions had been fully digested were likely due to his continuous enrichment of the Moon City residents within the Nation of Disorder. This was a mutually beneficial double cycle. After verifying his conjectures, a bolder idea surfaced in Aaron's mind, though it would require some preparation time. After taking another look at the magnificent palace and the boundless dark gold ocean outside Moon City, and imagining a future where this place would be filled with the northern and southern continents, Aaron's thoughts shifted slightly, and he returned to the Lost Nuens. Standing amidst the ruins, Aaron's pupils instantly turned golden, gazing at the deep pit from which the shadow giant had emerged. It was dark and obscure, with faint remnants of illusory waves. Aaron was certain that this place had indeed been an exit connecting the Chaos Sea to the outside world, similar to the abandoned ancient castle on the outskirts of Backland. However, he didn't know why the Chaos Sea had vanished so completely, leaving only residual aura. He had no intention of delving deeper. The first blasphemy slate that could manipulate the Chaos Sea was still in Dark Angel Sorcerer's hands. He had already successfully advanced, so there was no need to create extra trouble. Silently lifting the Nation of Disorder's blockade on the Lost Nuens, Aaron cast his gaze towards the deep sea, leveraging the connection of the rules in that area. After a glance with his true vision, Aaron's brows furrowed deeply. Although the original true creator Phantom had disappeared, and the predicted Angel of Destiny from the Aurora Order had not appeared, the pervasive pollution in this sea area made him feel uncomfortable. Just as he was pondering what had happened during his advancement, a dense dark gold mist suddenly appeared before Aaron's eyes, and an inexplicable sense of crisis arose in his heart, like a prey being targeted by a venomous snake. Without the slightest hesitation, the domain of judgment instantly enveloped him, isolating external perception. The star crown appeared above his head, with brilliant light flickering. A gray-blue door of exile with 7 brass keyholes quietly appeared before Aaron. Although he couldn't yet confirm the source of the danger, anything that could bring him such a sense of crisis would surely track ordinary teleportation or spirit world travel. Only the sealed artifact Grade 0 door of exile was the best way to escape. Without wasting time risking sensing the source of danger, Aaron decisively stepped through the door. Anyway, the value of this ruin had already been squeezed dry. On the turbid ocean, where scarlet mist drifted, a strange, tentacled octopus sea monster's body continuously swelled. Each bulging nodule split open, giving birth to more octopuses, each faintly tinged with scarlet. These monsters showed no signs of distortion. With remarkable fluidity, they each used their tentacles to retrieve a monocle made of crystal from the void, placing it over a position resembling a human's right eye. After glancing at the blurry island to the west, from which scarlet mist continuously surged, they turned their gaze back to the deep seabed. This aura. I never expected a complete Sephira to exist in the outside world. How interesting. What a pity, I was just a little short, and I could have used the rules of deception to appear directly before that fellow. The scholar of yore who entered the forsaken land of the gods seems to be his believer. I have a premonition that by following this clue, I will soon find Pallas. The octopus almonds paid no mind to the continuously gathering scarlet mist, which seemed to possess vitality. Their bodies suddenly exploded, and clusters of brilliant light points dissipated, vanishing from their original location. After repeatedly changing locations several times using the Door of Exile from the Star Crown, Aaron only teleported back to Irusul after confirming that the sense of dread had disappeared. Given my current Beander rank, any existence that can still give me this sense of dread must be at least a sequence 1 angel or above. I immediately suppressed the anomaly of the Nation of Disorder after my advancement, so it shouldn't be those two from the Augustus and Castia families. Although the Moses ascetic order has been tracking me, the hidden sage would never act rashly after what happened last time. The greatest possibility is that Pallas Zoroast's use of the Worm of Time and Trojan Horse of Destiny abilities attracted Amon's attention. He followed the anomaly of destiny to the Fog Sea and had been waiting until I lifted the concealment. Aaron pondered various possibilities, but his figure had already appeared in the underground hall of the Ancestral Tower, where he saw Varner Will and Elvin Garrow, who had already returned from the Moon Kingdom. Feeling the aura emanating from Aaron, Elvin Garrow's blood-red eyes froze for a moment. There was a fleeting sense of the Night Emperor, who once ruled the world, reappearing. His voice involuntarily deepened a few notes. "Congratulations on your advancement. I have brought back all of Solomon's treasures. All materials, Beyander characteristics, and sealed artifacts below the demigod level have been stored in the family treasury. There are still 4 demigod sealed artifacts remaining." As he spoke, his chest, entwined with sinister vines and thorns, split open from the middle, revealing a terrifying, profound, and indescribable aura of death and pressure. Aaron, who was distracted by calming the anomaly of the Nation of Disorder, calmly watched as a bone gate slowly emerged from the split body. With his current strength, he could now see the true form of this sealed artifact Grade 0. Mysterious symbols, rendered in pale and eerie green, emerged one after another, intertwining on the white bones. Once connected into a whole, they collapsed inward, transforming into a boundless, slowly rotating dark vortex. A total of 4 items, radiating intense spiritual fluctuations, flew out from within the vortex, quietly suspended before Aaron. Tingen City. After dealing with the deranged Mrs. Sharon, Klein returned alone by rented carriage to Zudaland Street. The scarlet moonlight shone on his face, flickering between light and dark. In his mind, Cohen lay, who had vomited his internal organs, and Dunn, whose mouth was covered in dark red blood, appeared alternately, making his thoughts both chaotic and scattered. Cohen lay is dead. I remember he just got engaged. His parents are still alive. What was the captain doing just now? His chaotic thoughts continued until Klein returned to his bedroom. His hand, which had just picked up a letter, paused slightly, then slowly put it down. He couldn't determine whether this operation was just an accident or another coincidence. After some thought, to confirm Captain Dunn Smith's condition, he decided to eliminate all interference and divine above the gray fog. The majestic palace and the ancient, mottled long table entered his eyes, as if they had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Klein sat in the high-backed chair belonging to the Fool, holding the pendulum in his left hand. He silently chanted the divinatory statement 7 times, then closed his eyes and entered a state of meditation. After a few seconds of stability, he opened his eyes, his deepened gaze now returned to normal. He looked at the citrine pendant, his heart gradually sinking, because the pendulum was rotating clockwise, with a considerable amplitude and a steady speed. This indicated that the answer was affirmative. Dunn Smith's anomaly would put him in danger. And the danger was not low. Closing his eyes for a moment, Klein erased the previous content and wrote a new divinatory statement. The reason for Dunn Smith's anomaly. He put away the citrine pendant, leaned back against the chair, and while silently chanting the divinatory statement, he entered a dream state through meditation. In that hazy, illusory world, he saw nothing, discovered nothing. Besides the grayness, there was only grayness. This means insufficient information. Divination failed. Klein opened his eyes, looked at the parchment on the bronze long table, and muttered bitterly and helplessly. Having gained no practical insights, Klein was about to return to reality to consult Mr. Azek when he suddenly heard layers of illusory prayers. Giant language. Klein instantly recognized this as son Derek. He composed himself and virtually tapped the expanding and contracting crimson star. Within the somewhat blurred prayer scene, Derek placed a beast hide inscribed with various symbols on a crude altar. Sequence 6, Wind Blessed. Main ingredients: 6 crystallized feathers from a blue shadow falcon, a pair of dragon eye sea eagle eyeballs. Auxiliary ingredients: 100 grams of dried octopus jellyfish powder, 50 milliliters of deep sea naga blood. To get a potion formula so quickly, Klein was surprised. After using divination to confirm the formula's correctness, he directly transmitted Derek's prayer scene to Hanged Man Alger. Although he hadn't yet received the compensation in pounds from Mr. Hanged Man, Klein first condensed the Light Supplicant and Solar High Priest potion formulas into light points and threw them into the crimson star representing Son Derek. Even though he had gained a Sequence 6 level potion formula, Klein was in no mood to be excited. After returning to reality, he urgently wrote on a letter. In a recent mission, my superior exhibited some unusual behavior. He sent me away, then half-crouched beside a teammate's corpse, his mouth covered in dark red blood. In your memory, have you encountered similar incidents? How should I help my superior? After the ink dried, Klein quickly scanned the letter from top to bottom, and at the end, he added another paragraph. Respected Mr. Azek, I received intelligence that Vice Admiral Hurricane Keelangos has secretly infiltrated Backland. He possesses a very powerful shepherd's glove. I'm not sure if this will interest you, but I believe it's necessary to let you know. Klein quickly finished, folded the letter, took out the copper whistle, put it to his lips, and blew hard. Silently, he saw illusory, hazy white bones being thrown out one by one from the top of the desk, forming a fountain that assembled into a giant monster. It was still nearly 4 meters tall, still covered in a faint glow, and still had its head poking through the roof, seemingly no different from before. Klein flicked his wrist, tossing the letter up, and saw the bone monster firmly catch it. He blew the copper whistle again, watching the messenger disintegrate into illusory white bones, falling like rain, disappearing into the surface of the desk. Watching the disappearing messenger, for some reason, an unprecedented sense of anxiety suddenly arose in Klein's heart. He felt as if something extremely bad was about to happen. This was the clown's premonition of crisis. Backland, Sherwood Borough, St. Wind Cathedral. In a simple, unadorned room, hanged man Alger, who had come to Backland to investigate Keelangos, was studying the investigation reports from the past few days, trying to find clues within them. To his upper right, a stack of papers filled with distorted symbols was placed. Just as Alger leaned back and reached to rub his eyes, he suddenly found his vision becoming illusory, presenting a dense, grayish-white mist. In the depths of this endless mist, there was a high-backed chair, as if it had always existed there, and an indistinct figure sat upon it. Mr. Fool. Alger had just thought of this when he saw a young man appear in the hazy, grayish-white mist. Wind-blessed potion formula. Alger was first startled, then showed a look of surprise. He pressed his hand to his chest, lowered his head, and said in a hushed voice, "Praise be to you, Mr. Fool." Before he finished speaking, everything he heard and saw disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Gazing at the collected Russell's diary and investigation reports, Alger's pupils trembled, and he once again felt the fool's power. This was the St. Wind Cathedral, once the headquarters of the Church of Storms. Although this was over 1,000 years ago, it didn't prevent believers from still considering it one of their holy sites. However, Mr. Fool could still descend silently and give a response. The dark golden mist around rippled. Aaron looked at the dim and unpredictable collective subconscious sea. Even with preparations, he still couldn't glimpse Adam's departure. Shaking his head indifferently, Aaron gathered the spiritual light cluster, symbolizing the discerner characteristic, in his hand. He sensed a faint resistance from within and, expressionless, clenched his hand. A power exceeding that of a king of angels instantly surged, and the clear light cluster, tinged with a grayish white, immediately transformed back into pure light particles. Connecting to the nation of disorder, the crimson gold, sun-chasing scepter, instantly appeared before Aaron. The rules within this divine kingdom's projection quietly changed, causing this grade 0 sealed artifact to emit a scorching white light that enveloped the light particles after the characteristic was shattered. The last remaining imprints were forcibly removed by violent means. The spiritual light particles split as they converged, separating into pure Beander characteristics. Glancing at Hermes, who had remained silent since his and Adam's arrival, Aaron unceremoniously put away the most precious discerner characteristic. Of the remaining 4 demigod characteristics that separated, Dreamweaver and Dreamwalker each accounted for 2. This clearly indicated that, over these long years, a certain unlucky Dreamweaver had mistakenly entered the dream labyrinth constructed by that psychic giant dragon. Adhering to a cooperative attitude, Aaron didn't hesitate and directly separated one Dreamweaver characteristic to Hermes. He remembered that Mr. Gluttony from the Psychology Alchemists was Hermes's beloved disciple. Aaron made no further gestures regarding the remaining characteristics, including the low-sequence characteristics that were still continuously separating. This wasn't due to stinginess but rather consideration of the current situation. The apocalypse would arrive early, and before that, he had to truly become an outer deity. This meant that after he advanced to Justiciar and completely accommodated the Nation of Disorder, he would need to further accommodate the Black Emperor pathway's sequence 1 and uniqueness. From the current state of the Evernight Goddess, it was clear that even for a true god, accommodating a neighboring pathway's uniqueness while maintaining one's own state was by no means easy. The best method was to hold another corresponding godhood ritual without compromise. The Black Emperor's godhood ritual required a truly meaningful nation and the establishment of a rigorous, complex, yet abnormal set of rules. He didn't need, nor did he have the time, to covertly promote the implementation of these rules through various decrees like George III. He only needed to completely shatter the common people's ignorant impression of Beyonder powers since the Fifth Epoch, after the gods retreated to the astral world. He needed to truly integrate the Beyonder world into ordinary people's lives, no longer a secret known only to the major churches and secret organizations. This would be a drastic reform, but also an opportunity. The potion system, which required a large number of Beyonder characteristics, and the blessing system, based on the Nation of Disorder, could establish the unique social rules he needed, conforming to the Black Emperor's advancement, in the shortest amount of time. Perhaps influenced by this high-level characteristic of the visionary pathway, Aaron's thoughts couldn't help but wander. After his mind calmed, his gaze turned to Hermes. This ancient angel silently accepted the Dreamweaver characteristic. For him, who had experienced the dark epoch ravaged by ancient gods, the law of the jungle had permeated his entire life. Naturally, he had no objection to the distribution of spoils. What truly unsettled him were the psychic giant dragon's last words before its death. As if finally understanding certain things, Hermes sighed with a look of melancholy. A tarot card, precisely the visionary card, appeared in his hand. He gently pushed it towards Aaron, his tone becoming more respectful than before. This blasphemy slate is no longer of much use to me, but it should still be helpful to your fiancé. Besides the corresponding potion formula, it can also protect the spiritual body and reduce the impact of continuously separating virtual personalities on divine balance before achieving angelhood. Aaron, who had only intended to find the subsequent potion formula and advancement ritual for Audrey, raised an eyebrow at the latter half of the sentence. He didn't refuse, taking the blasphemy slate and beginning to scrutinize it. The dark golden mist swirling around Hermes also dissipated at this moment, reconnecting with the external subconscious sea. Vague light and shadows peeled away from his body, arriving at the dream labyrinth that was about to collapse. The Dreamweaver's advancement ritual requires traversing the collective subconscious sea, using consciousness to connect to the dreams of at least 1,000 people, thereby weaving a deep dream, and implanting a psychological suggestion within the dream that is sufficient to create feedback in reality. Aaron had by now deciphered the complete potion formula from the blasphemy slate. Looking at Hermes, who seemed to be repairing the dream labyrinth, he pondered and spoke. Create feedback in reality. Controlling the virtual personalities to regather the misty, clear, and hazy dreams, Hermes nodded slightly and explained in a calm voice. Your previous isolation of Erhog and the most dangerous part of the dream allowed this labyrinth, composed of deep dreams, to survive. You only need to enter it before it completely disappears, washed away by the collective subconscious sea, and implant a psychological suggestion to eliminate dragon worship. The long-standing custom of dragon worship in Hooterak village and its surrounding areas in the real world will then completely disappear silently. This is what it means to create feedback in reality. One of my virtual personalities will remain here, guarding this dream labyrinth from the erosion of the subconscious ocean. Your fiancé can use this to advance after digesting the manipulator potion. I thank you for your help on Audrey's behalf. Aaron smiled, put away the visionary card, and informed this ancient angel of the honorific name, Lord of Order. Then, He added meaningfully. You can invoke my name when needed. Having reached a tacit understanding, Aaron nodded and then left the subconscious sea, returning to the nation of disorder. At the end of the Pillar of Heaven, directly above the miniature world, Aaron overlooked the entire dark golden world. He restrained the nation of disorder's instinctive resistance to the inherent pollution within the current Grossel's travels, and incidentally sensed Grossel's state on the primitive island. Faster than I expected. In at most half a year, the nation of disorder's pollution will balance the mother goddess of depravity's pollution. This speed might even increase after I advance to Justiciar. However, that drop of river of eternal darkness water is almost depleted. At this rate, at least 3 more drops will be needed. Without being able to recreate a death's godhood ritual, the Evernight goddess will need even more river of eternal darkness to control and even accommodate death's uniqueness. It's no longer possible to spare so much for Grosel. Aaron pinched his brow, a mix of joy and worry, contemplating whether he should visit Calderon's city deep within the spirit world again. According to Iana Bella, the mother goddess of depravity's oracle mentioned that the mother nest's power has partially seeped into reality, so other Sephira might also have undergone some slight changes. Whether it's for a tributary of the river of eternal darkness or to choose a breakthrough point for future counter-infiltration into the western continent, Calderon indeed needs to confirm it again. Making a quick decision, Aaron directly lit up Bonoa's prayer star, throwing the discerner characteristic along with the request to forge a sealed artifact from it into the open dark gold portal. Looking at Grossel's travels, which was imprinted with a radiant cross, Aaron thought about it and still gave up the idea of sealing it together with the attendant of mystery's characteristic. These 2 rivals, if too close, might cause some trouble. Dense dark gold mist gathered, swirling on the surface of the parchment book, transforming into complex patterns, enveloping it before finally landing in the magnificent palace at the center of the world, placed beside the huge throne surrounded by many prayer stars. Adam has made a decision, and King George III should act very soon. I will create an opportunity for you to advance. Nodding lightly towards Walna, who was attracted by the changes within the nation of disorder, Aaron's figure vanished in an instant. Deep within the Evernight plains, above a profound rift like the abyss, streaks of colorless light, as if composed of countless illusory things, emerged from the void. One extremely thick, yet seemingly projected, scroll of civilization unfolded after another, finally condensing into a figure whose face was obscured by a hazy clear light. Behind him, within the unfolded scrolls of civilization, countless black and white, bizarre eyes formed by entangled strings of 0 and 1 were firmly fixed within them. Even for the hidden sage, information can be lost, degraded, or become chaotic during continuous backups. This is determined by the underlying rules of the entire world, a manifestation of the symbols of error, decay, and entropy increase. To help the mother goddess of depravity infiltrate the mother nest's power into the outside world, while the gods of the astral world were being held back by the outer deities, the hidden sage went all out. As a higher-ranked nemesis of this evil god, the god of steam and machinery had already used the hidden sage's information backups, obtained from Aaron, to take advantage of his distraction, finding loopholes and retrieving his externally hidden backup information one by one, sealing them all within his divine kingdom. After this battle, the hidden sage will surely be severely wounded. From his understanding of this evil god, he will inevitably hide in that unknown place, obscured by digital mist, which he has searched for in vain for over 1,000 years. Sensing the special fluctuations transmitted by the information backups, the god of steam and machinery looked down. This space and its corresponding spirit world area were simultaneously swept by invisible ripples, and the hidden void rifts were restored to their most basic particle structure, while the conceptualized knowledge, information, and characters attached to them were enveloped in layers of scrolls. The alternating 0s and 1s were like chaotic and disordered scribbles, continuously spreading until they completely filled several scrolls of civilization. The god of steam and machinery suddenly raised his hand and pointed at one of the 0s. After a sound like shattering glass, the 0, poked by his fingertip rapidly distorted into an eyeless pupil. Some hidden information with altered pointers was deciphered, and a coordinate, difficult to interpret with language or other mystical symbols, quietly floated within the scrolls of civilization. The god of steam and machinery calmly withdrew his hand, no longer looking at the bottomless rift below. For him, the importance of determining the mother nest's power's destination was far less than locating the hidden sage. A special, strangely structured symbol, woven from numerous illusory and complex pieces of information, simultaneously appeared in his hand, identical to the token previously given to Aaron. Beside the Church of Tranquility, within the monastery built specifically for church clergy. Sequence 3 Chaoswalker Potion Main Ingredients: Root Crystal of the Frenzied Illusion Tree, Heart of the Order Demon. Alfred, who had just advanced to Imperative Mage, was somewhat shocked as he deciphered the potion formula that had suddenly appeared in his mind, only coming back to his senses when he heard Audrey's surprised voice and saw Aaron, who had appeared at some unknown time and was holding his sister by the waist. Audrey, whose face was flushed from the sudden attack, symbolically resisted twice before murmuring in a voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz. "You." Before she could finish, her lips felt moist, and the words she had intended to say immediately turned into meaningless gasps. Susie, who was eating, suddenly looked up, wagging her tail happily. Alfred, by the door, quickly recovered from his shock, feeling a bit awkward and bewildered. He had originally come to bid farewell to Audrey because he was going to the front lines, and now he didn't know what to do. Aaron's fingers traced her smooth, flowing golden hair. After a brief kiss, he gently put down Audrey, whose cheeks were burning, and chuckled softly at Alfred by the door, saying, "Although not as good as the Hunter pathway, war is indeed an opportunity for an Imperative Mage to quickly digest potions. I have already given you the Sequence 3 potion and ritual. You can tell Audrey if you need my help." Alfred was stunned for a moment, his awkward expression fading. He nodded steadily, glanced at Audrey, who was slightly bowing her head with crimson earlobes, and then turned to leave. It wasn't until the sound of footsteps faded that Audrey playfully smacked Aaron, who had a mischievous smile on his face. Given his status, this timing was definitely intentional. Although they were already engaged, such intimate gestures in front of her family still made her somewhat flustered. Holding Audrey's hand, Aaron smiled gently, and the visionary card appeared in his hand. He softly said, "This is a gift for you. It can protect your spiritual body and reduce the impact of constantly separating virtual personalities on divine balance." Audrey, who had already explored and searched for the judgment card with him, widened her eyes slightly. She recognized the similarly shaped tarot card at a glance and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Blasphemy card. The Spectator Pathways Blasphemy card. After receiving a positive response, Audrey could no longer suppress her inner curiosity. She took the tarot card and extended her spirituality, her expression growing more longing. Manipulator, Dreamweaver, Discerner, Author, and Sequence 0, Visionary. Looking at the blasphemy card in Audrey's hand, Susie circled gleefully at Aaron's feet, saying with anticipation in fluent lowness, "Where's my gift?" Smiling and nodding, Aaron stroked Susie's smooth golden fur, took out the Dreamwalker characteristic, which he had already prepared and separated from the Discerner characteristic, and placed it in the special spatial pocket Susie was carrying. With a blush still on her cheeks, Audrey flipped through the ethereal book of the Visionary card, unable to put it down. She mastered the trick after only a few attempts. This blasphemy slate quickly transformed into points of light and merged into the collective subconscious sea, pulled by Audrey's virtual persona to sink onto her consciousness island, imprinting three-dimensional symbols that seemed to connect with the mind. Deep within the consciousness island, the light that illuminated the entire world, the indescribable sounds, and the illusory sea she had seen in her dreams all emerged one by one and quickly settled. Audrey's consciousness ascended under the spiritual sky, looking down at her mind island in a state of absolute clarity, truly feeling the subtle influence of the divinity deep within her spirituality. After a long while, she reopened her eyes. The golden vertical pupils receded, and her emerald eyes looked at Aaron, who had a smile on his face. With a slightly complex emotion, she half smiled and sighed. Is this what divinity is? Aaron gently caressed a somewhat bewildered Susie, then nodded slightly, his expression also turning serious. Everything possesses divinity, and most of it contains the will of the original creator. As Beyonder characteristics accumulate, he will gradually awaken and replace us. On this point, high-sequence Beyonders of the spectator pathway must be especially careful. The manifestations of increased corresponding divinity and deepening corruption are not obvious, one could even say they are subtle. Recalling the unique perspective she had experienced with the blasphemy slate, Audrey nodded vigilantly, then asked with some concern. You were already an angel, then? With a slight curl of his lips, Aaron waved his hand, not explaining in detail, but simply blocking Susie's hearing. My situation is somewhat special, and since the two pathways of order do not directly originate from the original, divinity's influence on me is not significant. The more fundamental content requires you to possess the angelic rank to know. Also, I need to correct your statement. I have already advanced to King of Angels. Audrey was stunned, her pupils contracting sharply. She was no longer the novice who had just encountered the mystical world. A saint at the demigod level was already a diocesan bishop in any Orthodox church, so she naturally understood what a King of Angels meant. Not continuing the topic, Aaron briefly explained the ritual for advancing to sequence 3 inches Dream Weaver, provided by Hermes to Audrey, finally adding. The mind dragon lurking in Hydrak village has been cleared. The remaining dream labyrinth there can help you advance to a Dream Weaver, so you need to find an opportunity to thoroughly digest the manipulator potion as soon as possible. Aaron, who was speaking, paused, extending his spirituality as if sensing something. In the hidden space of the star crown, the special symbol given by the god of steam and machinery was radiating a faint, clear light. He found it so quickly. Aaron's eyebrows immediately raised after analyzing the transmitted message, and he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. After a moment of contemplation, he didn't respond immediately but looked back at Audrey. I have already given the characteristic of that mind dragon to a craftsman. I will take you to see him shortly, so he can custom make a sealed artifact that you can utilize to a limited extent at your current level. This way, your safety will also be guaranteed. Audrey's eyes immediately sparkled, and her thoughts couldn't help but wander. To be called, he, an angel-level craftsman, could it be the Pope of the God of Steam and Machinery Church? A custom-made Grade 0 sealed artifact. The entire Tarot Club doesn't have one. No, it should just be that my previous level was too low to access them. As a revived hidden existence, Mr. Fool, even without serving angels, couldn't possibly lack corresponding items. Looking at the slightly distracted Audrey, Aaron smiled. With the tacit permission of Pope Annabella, his spirituality spread through the monastery, quickly locking onto a figure. At the same time, in the row of resting rooms on the outskirts of the monastery, Furs tidied her hair, picked up a rich cup of coffee, and took a sip. Then she put down the coffee cup and lay on the bed ungracefully, saying comfortably. As expected of Felmer coffee from the Paws River Valley, it always makes one crave more. The only drawback is that there's too little of it. I can only freeload a cup from lovely Melissa. Shu, with her very capable short golden hair, rubbed her forehead, looking helplessly at Melissa, who was covering her mouth and smiling. She directly helped her friend correct her undignified posture and grumbled irritably. I gave you all of mine. Supplies are tight on the front lines now, and the shipping routes to the southern continent have been cut off. If you still want to drink, I'll take you to Miss Audrey. Furs gave an embarrassed smile and quickly begged for mercy, finally escaping Shu's clutches. As a fellow member of the Tarot Club, she believed that Miss Justice would certainly not be stingy with a bit of coffee, but both her demigod strength and her identity as a duke's fiancé constantly reminded her to mind her manners. Watching the two playfully interact, Melissa's eyes curved into a smile. She pushed the silver-lined tin can containing coffee powder on the table towards Furs, then sighed and said, I don't drink much coffee, you can have all of these. However, I heard before that the restored Byam Kingdom and the Highland Kingdom have completely stirred up the situation in the southern continent recently. Even without Faysak's blockade of the shipping routes, supplies from the southern continent couldn't be delivered as before. I just don't know how the people there are doing now. Furs and Shu both fell silent. They had both experienced the Backland Great Smog and understood very well that before the rolling tide of the era, they were merely grains of sand swept along. Although they couldn't claim to be in dire straits now, they indeed had no energy to pay attention to foreign lands. Shu deliberated for a moment, just about to speak to comfort Melissa, when her eyes blinked, and she found that Melissa's figure had disappeared at some point. Exchanging a surprised glance with Furs, Shu didn't panic. She only guessed that a high-ranking member of the church might have summoned her. After all, this was the holy cathedral of the Church of Evernight, one of the safest places in the world. Melissa herself was momentarily disoriented, then she was twisted into Audrey's room by Aaron. Looking at the somewhat bewildered Melissa and the slightly puzzled Audrey, Aaron smiled and explained. The angel-level craftsman we are going to see is Russell's second son. For some reasons, he has left the God of Steam and Machinery Church and is currently working for me. This matter is known to only a few people even within the Steam Church, so you must keep it a secret. Additionally, I will have him teach you how to continue advancing in the Savon pathway. As for how much you learn, that will depend on your own ability. Melissa nervously pursed her lips, not letting the sudden surprise go to her head. Even though she didn't feel she was important enough to be plotted against by this great figure, this unknown gift always made her feel at a loss. Feeling Melissa's tension, Aaron curled his lips playfully, inexplicably reminded of Klein's reaction. The brilliant starlight surging from the crown of stars enveloped the figures of the few people. Don't overthink it. You can directly inform Mr. Fool about this matter. Audrey raised her eyebrows thoughtfully. She knew that Mr. Fool's dear world was actually the deceased Nighthawk, Klein Moretti. While feeling somewhat enlightened, she also found herself in a peach orchard filled with lush vegetation and blooming flowers. At the end of the colorful peach orchard, 9 colossal tripods, some round and some square, with 2 ears and 3 legs, abruptly came into view. Even from a distance, one could feel their unique solemnity. Bernadette and Bonneva simultaneously withdrew their gazes from the giant tripods and looked at Aaron and the others who had suddenly appeared. Further back, Catlia, in a warlock robe, was a beat slower but also turned her head as if sensing something. Without wasting time on pleasantries, Aaron nodded in greeting, then led Audrey and Melissa to the side of the giant tripods. After briefly explaining his idea, he began to examine the giant tripod directly facing him. Given his sequence, he could naturally sense that these 9 giant tripods were not physical objects. Like the surrounding peach orchard, they were merely products of mystical reenactment, and the discerner, Beander characteristic he had given to Bonneva earlier was among them. After glancing at the somewhat anxious Melissa, Bonneva nodded slightly. Bernadette, beside him, looked at Aaron and explained. These are creations I mystical reenactment from stories left by my father. They can greatly enhance the ability to forge high-level Beander characteristics. As for your request, Bonneva and I have discussed it. A spectator pathway demigod can already separate virtual personalities. We plan to use one of Audrey's virtual personalities as a guide to create a Grade 0 sealed artifact that initially possesses living characteristics. With that virtual personality as an intermediary, even a Sequence 4 can use a Grade 0 sealed artifact to a certain extent. Once she advances to Dreamweaver and completely separates that virtual personality as another identity, the corresponding negative effects will be greatly reduced. After some deliberation, Aaron agreed to the plan. He then looked at the creations, which were very different from the current era, with a strange expression. Even if Bernadette didn't explicitly say so, he could guess that the source of the mystical reenactment was probably the myth of Yu the Great casting the 9 tripods. The 9 tripods are ritual vessels, not for refining artifacts, Aaron silently complained in his heart, but he had no intention of correcting it. Instead, he was thoughtful. With the protection of the Celestial Venerable's barrier, the history of the Western continent should not have been completely cut off. The blessed items that have infiltrated the Western continent can indeed align with certain myths. Gathering his scattered thoughts, Aaron gave some instructions and then no longer lingered. He sensed the positioning provided by the god of steam and machinery, and layers of starlight once again surged from the crown of stars, carrying his figure away into the interwoven void. Within the astral world, which was filled with various concepts, abstract distortions, and chaos, layers of starlight portals appeared, and Aaron stepped out from them. This was his first time in the astral world after accommodating a uniqueness. His true vision swept past various graffiti-like abstract paintings, finally solidifying on the transparent, cracked barrier behind them. No wonder Atom and Evernight Goddess both feel that the apocalypse will arrive early. Witnessing the state of the barrier firsthand, Aaron sighed and shook his head, not caring whether mentioning those two directly in the astral world would cause them to be sensed. And the moment his voice fell, a misty glow, as if it had been waiting for a long time, surged out from the void, slowly unfolding into scenes of grand and magnificent scrolls. This is only the edge of the astral world being affected. The cracks filled by the divine kingdoms are far greater than here, and Evernight and Earth Mother have also been more or less affected by the Mother Goddess of Depravity this time. The situation has become increasingly dire. A deep, rich voice emanated from the scroll of civilization, responding to Aaron's sigh. A mechanical puppet, reflecting a cold metallic luster, walked out from the scroll of civilization. Within its semi-hollow chest, a bronze triangular holy emblem imprisoned a vast amount of light composed of illusory particles, which was also the source of the pressure far exceeding that of ordinary angels. Its eyes, constructed from countless miniature gears, rotated, scrutinizing Aaron for a moment. The mechanical puppet, with an extremely ordinary face, revealed a smile. Originally, I was prepared to use the Hidden Sage's sequence to help you complete a simplified godhood ritual to accommodate the uniqueness, but it seems unnecessary now. Examining the divine descent vessel before him, Aaron could faintly feel his spiritual intuition warning him. Even the 0 to 17 back then had not given him this feeling. He raised an eyebrow and spoke thoughtfully. Is this divine descent vessel specifically prepared for the Hidden Sage? It feels very different to me. The god of steam and machinery nodded slightly but did not explain in detail. Given the current situation, I cannot leave the astral world. Therefore, I have endowed it with a portion of my authority. With the Hidden Sage's current state, cooperating with you should be sufficient. This avatar had already found the most crucial residual aura on the Evernight plains, and combined with the information gathered over the long period since the fifth epoch, I have deduced his true hidden location. The sooner we act, the more difficult it will be for his state to recover. By the end of his words, his emotions couldn't help but fluctuate slightly. It was clear that he intended to strike while the iron was hot, eager to eliminate the Hidden Sage, this obstacle on the outer deity pathway. Aaron pondered for a moment, recalling the oracle relayed by Her Grace Annabella, and asked cautiously. Besides information on the Hidden Sage, have you detected any traces of the methods used by that Mother Goddess at the apex of the outer deity to activate the Mother Nest? The god of steam and machinery's emotions had already calmed. He pondered for a few seconds before responding. The aura of the Mother Nest was indeed eliminated very cleanly, leaving no trace. Aaron frowned, weighing in his heart whether to trade for the blessing of the earth, formed from Ombella's remains from the City of Silver, and risk probing it. Worried about causing uncontrollable unknown changes, Aaron pondered for a moment and temporarily abandoned this idea. He looked at the god of steam and machinery, who was silently waiting for his response. You should know that George III is plotting to ascend to the Black Emperor's godhood, and now he might even be just one step away from the godhood ritual. And to trap the Hidden Sage, I must go all out. If I get entangled with him, and George III takes the opportunity to advance, I cannot accept such a risk. The splendid scroll of civilization retracted, shrinking back into the triangular holy emblem in his chest. The god of steam and machinery, who was quite knowledgeable about the Black Emperor, remained silent for a few seconds before slowly speaking. What help do you need? As he asked, the abstract, painting-like astral world around them was cleared. The god of steam and machinery used his own symbols to obscure this area, and in his words, no longer hesitated to continue with a hint of warning. The mother goddess of depravity caused the deepest impact on the Earth Mother by inciting the mother nest, but the Evernight goddess, who holds the moon uniqueness, was already attempting to accommodate the death uniqueness, so her condition isn't much better due to this interference. After that, Badhail secretly tried to contact me. If he did so with me, then it's even more likely with Osikus, who is already hostile to the storm. It won't be long before Intis officially declares war on LotM. Feeling the change in order around him, Aaron glanced at the nearby astral world. He had some expectations for the god of combat's reaction, so he wasn't surprised. He looked back at the god of steam and machinery and said meaningfully, "Don't worry, the help I need won't make things difficult for you. After all, this is a popular trend of the era. Since the god of combat has extended an olive branch to you, why not go with the flow and make a pact with him? You don't need to pay anything. In the current situation, maintaining neutrality is your biggest bargaining chip. As for what you can get from the god of combat, that will be your extra reward." Aaron's suggestion clearly exceeded the god of steam and machinery's expectations. He took a deep look at the eloquent Aaron, and emphasized, reminding him, "Is this your intention? Or Ammonizes' intention?" Aaron did not dwell on this question. He smiled and retorted playfully, "Does it matter? You don't have a competitive relationship with the gods, and maintaining neutrality is the safest decision for you. Anyway, the winner takes all in the end." Looking at the silent god of steam and machinery, who seemed to be deep in thought, Aaron paused, remembering an unintentional hint from Erodes the magic mirror, and then asked, "Do you know that Archbishop Horamik Haydn of the Backland Diocese is a member of the Twilight Hermit Order?" The god of steam and machinery nodded slightly, a faint smile gracing his expressionless puppet face. "After Rissel's matter, I have been paying attention to this organization. Horamik joined at that time according to my oracle, and Adam acquiesced to my probing." Aaron nodded in understanding, then added, "Since that's the case, I need you to give Horamik an oracle, instructing him to contact the Augustus royal family as a member of the Twilight Hermit Order. He only needs to inform George III of the situation in the astral world and the Steam Church's willingness to support him in achieving Black Emperor status as soon as possible. The rest will be handled by others for us." After weighing it for a moment, the god of steam and machinery agreed to Aaron's proposal. It seemed that due to other considerations, he was no longer urgent about hunting the hidden sage. Amidst the turning gears, his dignified and mellow voice resonated. "I will fulfill your request. In addition, I will give you this avatar. When you deem the time ripe, it will lead you to the hidden sage." The mechanical puppet reverted to its most basic particulate structure, shrinking along with the numerous symbols diffused at the edge of the astral world, disappearing into the triangular holy emblem originally embedded in its hollow chest. Aaron glanced at the triangular holy emblem that had floated autonomously before him. Naturally, he wouldn't store it in the Nation of Disorder. The star crown above his head radiated starlight, and the Divine Descent avatar was contained within the extra-dimensional space opened by the Planeswalker Authority. Gazing at the distant barrier, Aaron eliminated his aura and quickly departed the astral world. Backland, the headquarters of the god of steam and machinery church, Backland Diocese, St. Serlan Cathedral. Archbishop Horamik Haydn, dressed in a white priest's robe and wearing a cleric's soft hat, suddenly paused his action of turning a page. A hint of surprise flashed in the depths of his eyes. A dark, metal-gleaming muzzle appeared behind him, and surging airflow gushed out, pushing him towards the sealed area underground. In just a few breaths, Horamik hovered high up on the second underground level, looking down at the exquisitely structured, intricately symbolic sealed compartments. His gaze fixed on the continuously rising light in the deepest part. That was the core of St. Serlan Cathedral's seal, 0 to 19, the Knowledge Codex. Horamik did not hesitate. The surging airflow instantly vanished. He knelt on one knee, drawing a triangular holy emblem on his chest. A moment later, he looked up again, his expression bewildered, at the now calm 0 to 19. Taking a deep breath, Horamek left the puppet he had refined on the second underground level to continue guarding, while he quietly turned and left. Under the cover of night, he arrived at a hidden stronghold concealed in the Backland Bridge area. Almost the moment he arrived, a clear, cold female voice rang out. "You shouldn't be here." Horamek stopped his action of pushing the door and looked in the direction of the voice. He saw a lady in a black evening gown emerge from the shadows, her face obscured by a golden mask. Looking at this demigod of the Augustus royal family, Horamek did not explain much. Under her somewhat wary gaze, he took out a scroll and threw it over. The evening gown demigod frowned. With a point from a distance, she opened the scroll and saw a magnificent mountain range imprinted within, shrouded in solidified twilight. Countless palaces and towers were vaguely visible behind it, and the twilight glow came from a huge cross at the top of the mountain range. "Please hand this to His Majesty George III. I wish to meet the true king." Horamek didn't mind the sudden sharp gaze of the demigod opposite him, and added calmly, "You cannot make decisions on this matter. Report it as soon as possible. I will wait for a reply here." The painting he provided depicted the true dream realm he entered every time he attended the Twilight Hermit Order, and only members of this secret organization would understand its meaning. The evening gown demigod snorted coldly, grabbed the scroll without a word, and with a wave of her hand, erased the distance, instantly disappearing into the shadows. In the adjacent South Backland, inside the already registered folk herbal medicine shop, the owl Harry, with his big round eyes, tilted his head, staring at the tall young man who walked out of the room. Feeling the mystical connection brought by the beast tamer potion, he spoke with some hesitation. "Are you Darkwill?" Ignoring the silly bird, Darkwill impatiently pulled out a mirror from the counter. Looking at his handsome and tall reflection in the mirror, he muttered to himself, "I didn't expect advancing to vampire would have this effect. The only flaw is that these blood-red eyes are too conspicuous." Before Darkwill could finish, Emlyn White, the moon, with a face full of dark lines, walked out of the room right behind him and interrupted directly. "Sanguine. I'll say it one last time, we are noble sanguine. If you use those 3 words again, I guarantee I'll punch your face back to its original state." Darkwill gave a sheepish smile, quick-wittedly grabbing Harry the owl, who was about to say something, and pressing the outspoken, foolish bird back onto the counter. Emlyn pouted, but didn't press the issue. He had only come here tonight to find Mr. World, and it was by chance, as he was leaving, that he caught this fellow preparing to advance to a noble sanguine, so he helped out of consideration for Mr. World. Without further delay, Emlyn's body blurred, tinged with light red, transforming into a hazy moonlight that vanished into the night, leaving behind a Darkwill filled with envy. Ignoring the commotion outside, in the deepest secret room of the folk herbal shop, Klein, wearing the face of the ruthless adventurer Gehrman Sparrow, frowned as he looked at the specially purchased mirror. After waiting for a long time with no result, he wiped away the symbol for summoning erodes. This mirror might be in some special location, and a one-way summoning ritual cannot target it. As he thought this, a familiar prayer suddenly reached Klein's ears. "Melissa." Klein's expression subtly shifted. He immediately put away the mirror, leaving 2 demigod puppets to guard, and quickly reversed his steps 4 times to arrive above the gray fog, where he heard the complete prayer. "Rissel's second son, the favored one of that deity, has left the Church of Steam and is even going to teach Melissa." Quickly summarizing the key points of the prayer, Klein's expression turned strange as he lightly tapped the bronze long table. He was both surprised that Aaron's secretly accumulated power had already connected with the Church of Steam, and somewhat uneasy about the reason for this fellow transmigrator's generous gift to Melissa. "Ultimately, I am still too weak. The Bizarro Sorcerer potion is only a tiny bit away from being fully digested. I need to obtain the subsequent potion formulas as soon as possible." Taking a deep breath, Klein, in the fool's tone, comforted Melissa. He habitually swept his true sight around the herbal shop, and after finding nothing unusual, he returned to reality. Backland Bridge area, Horamek silently gazed at the streets illuminated by gas streetlights in the distance, then suddenly shifted his gaze as if sensing something. Under the crimson moonlight, the elegant evening gown demigod, who had left long ago, quietly reappeared. Her gaze from beneath the golden mask strangely scrutinized Horamek for a moment, and she spoke in a clear, cold voice. "Archbishop, please follow me." As her words fell, behind her, a illusory door made purely of ethereal blue light emerged. Drawing a triangular holy emblem on his chest, Horamek directly chanted the honorific name of the god of steam and machinery in ancient Hermes. Only then did he calmly step into that door. Accompanied by ethereal blue light and a slight sense of weightlessness, Horamek found himself within a magnificent and solemn palace. The familiar murals made him realize that this was Sodrolic Palace. Following his spiritual intuition, Horamek looked towards the depths of the palace, towards George III, who sat on the throne wearing a crown. The moment his gaze met those indifferent eyes, an indescribable sense of terror nearly overwhelmed him. Looking at the somewhat discomfited Horamek, George III's lips curved into a mocking arc. Although this body was still the illusory form used to deceive outsiders, the will that descended through twisted order was a genuine king of angels. Having given the archbishop a show of power, George III stopped, his deep, majestic voice seeming to cause the splendid murals within Sodrolic Palace to be covered in spiderweb-like shadows. "State your purpose." Horamek opened his mouth, his eyes somewhat hollow, and the triangular holy emblem he wore suddenly erupted with a faint, clear light, shielding him from the distortion George III had secretly applied. Horamek, his mind restored to normal, his expression subtly changed, but he dared not say more, only revealing the oracle he had received in St. Serlan Cathedral. Limited by the demigod level, terms like outer deity in the oracle were replaced by indescribable words, but this did not affect George III's understanding. After accurately understanding the situation in the astral world, especially after sensing the drawing in intent released by the god of steam and machinery, George III's lips couldn't help but curve again. Outside Sodrolic Palace, beside the towering bell of order, Adam, dressed in a simple white robe and wearing a silver cross pendant, looked down with indifferent eyes. His pale golden eyes seemed to reflect everything, and he raised his right hand, using his finger as a pen, sketching something in the air. Deep within the spirit world, Calderon City. The orange-red light symbolizing twilight enveloped the spiritual sky, and the outer areas, swallowed by gray-white mist, were left with only collapsed pale giant pillars. Aaron scrutinized Calderon, which had been used as a shield to face the god of combat's wrath once, and his will manipulated the part of the underworld authority that was integrated into the abyss of ferrying within the embryonic divine kingdom. The previously extremely resistant intangible force receded, and behind Aaron, illusory light suddenly erupted, instantly collapsing inward to form a pair of double-opening bronze doors. The slightly illusory surface of the door was covered with countless mysterious patterns. As an indescribable deathly silence permeated, a crack appeared in the door. Through this crack, Aaron directly saw the deepest and most profound river in the heart of Calderon, a river that seemed to flow through a lightless night. Calderon has been further eroded by that tributary of the river of eternal darkness. The order of this former divine kingdom has been completely twisted. Simply opening the door of the underworld can directly connect to that tributary. Aaron keenly detected the change in rules. He did not retreat. Although the nation of disorder could not currently compare to the river of eternal darkness in terms of completeness, a Sephira was a Sephira. Without needing to worry about contamination, a mere tributary could not stop him. From the nation of disorder, he took out the strange wolf-headed, snake-bodied statue made by the Evernight goddess. Aided by the protection of the authority of concealment, Aaron quickly restrained the Sephira's aura and passed directly through the mutated door of the underworld to the underground core of Calderon. Although his primary purpose for coming this time was to retrieve water from the river of eternal darkness again, Aaron was more interested in exploring whether he could use this Sephira, which had been eroding reality for a long time, to find a weak point in Celestial Worthy's seal and seize the opportunity to infiltrate the Western continent in reverse. With this thought, even though he heard the faint, illusory gurgling of the river, Aaron did not immediately act. Instead, he ignored the deathly silence that could turn everything into undead and continued to delve deeper towards the convergence point of the gray-white tide. After an unknown amount of time, Aaron once again saw the dark, illusory tributary, where countless figures lingered. His true sight swept over the tributary, which was permeated with gray-white mist, but he did not find the previously most prominent 2 generations of death. Have they sunk into the true river of eternal darkness? Or, Aaron frowned, not approaching further. Instead, he took out the magic mirror Erodes. Having finally escaped the alternate space opened by the crown of stars, Erodes, who had been scared half to death by the god of steam and machinery's divine descent avatar, froze in midair before he could offer his flattery. Inside the hall filled with dark gold mist, Aaron sat on the throne. Just as he was about to extend his spirituality to probe the 4 figures within the dark gold light points below, he gently pinched his brow. No, I must act cautiously, not impulsively. I need to think things through thoroughly, at least eliminating some hidden dangers first. He looked up at the chaotic eye at the top of the throne behind him, then scanned the area around the throne. With a raise of his hand, the dark gold mist surged, lifting 4 items closer to Aaron. They were a ring with a white, eye-like gem embedded in it, a golden staff, a chaotic, translucent cuboid book, and an ancient, silver-gray ring. These were the gifts left by God Almighty and the celestial worthy during Aaron's fusion with the nation of disorder. Aaron took a deep breath, his spirituality spreading and expanding, mobilizing the power of the Sephira. The dark gold mist fluctuated violently. After preparing for any potential attack, Aaron extended his spirituality to the 4 items floating around him and the chaotic eye at the top of the throne behind him. A moment later, Aaron opened his eyes, his face filled with shock, and he murmured, as expected of the fragmented personalities of the primordial one, pillar-level outer deity. Their generosity is truly astounding. Is this what it feels like to be a European emperor? Eye of Chaos assimilated the uniqueness of the outer deity sequence, which the Son of Chaos was drawn to and infiltrated into the primordial one's barrier. Ability blurs the boundaries of rules, amplifying or diminishing the effects of Beander abilities, including but not limited to damage, authority, loss of control, and madness. It can affect a single pathway true god at most, but is ineffective against multi-pathway true gods and outer deities, and will cause a backlash. Side effect: cannot be used by those below angel rank. After each use, passively endure a rule backlash of the same level as the affected target. That is, if the Eye of Chaos is used to affect an angel, one must endure a rule backlash of angel rank. Ring of Wisdom, semi-sealed, formed primarily from the Beander characteristic of a sequence 2 inches Wisdom Angel, of the White Tauren pathway, incorporating Beander characteristics of sequence 3 to 9 of the White Tauren pathway, and fused with some dark gold mist. Ability 1. Imitation. Being knowledgeable, it is versatile. It can identify, perceive, remember, and imitate abilities it has witnessed. In its semi-sealed state, it can only analyze and imitate abilities below sequence 4 demigod, with a maximum of 3 types. For sequence 4 demigod level abilities, it can analyze and imitate 1 type. All successfully imitated abilities can be used repeatedly. The greater the difference in sequence level between the holder of the Ring of Wisdom and the analyzed target, the higher the probability of failure in analysis and imitation, and the worse the effect of the imitated ability. The smaller the difference in sequence level with the analyzed target, the better the effect of the ability after successful imitation. Abilities below demigod can be restored up to 90%, and sequence 4 demigod abilities can be restored up to 70%. 2. Insight. Discerns the rules of the world and the mysteries of fate. In its semi-sealed state, for targets below demigod, it can help the holder discern secrets, including weaknesses, of targets no more than 2 sequence levels higher than themselves. For targets above demigod, it is weakened to no more than 1 sequence level higher than the holder, and is ineffective against angels. When warned, a crisis will forcibly trigger a prophecy, providing an early warning in the form of images, once a month. Negative effect. After each use, all living beings within a 1 kilometer radius centered on the Ring of Wisdom will be affected, hearing sounds they shouldn't hear and seeing images they shouldn't see, lasting for 2 hours. Scepter of Sun Chasing, semi-sealed, formed primarily from the Beander characteristic of a sequence 2 inches Lightseeker, of the Sun pathway, incorporating Beander characteristics of sequence 3 to 9 of the Sun pathway, and fused with some dark gold mist. Ability 1. Realm of No Darkness. Emanates clear light, transforming the surrounding area into a land of no darkness, no shadows, and no evil. It can defend against dark and evil attacks. 2. Spear of No Darkness. In its semi-sealed state, it accumulates radiance based on the consumed spirituality. It can unleash a pure, extremely bright, incandescent long spear attack comparable to a sequence 3 strike, and swell into a miniature sun capable of illuminating a city. Negative effect. After each use, it requires the holder's blood. Holding it for a long time will cause the Beander characteristic to forcibly detach from the body, accompanied by a strong burning sensation. Book of Chaos. Formed from the sequence 1 Beander characteristic stripped from the outer deity Son of Chaos, fused with some dark gold mist. Ability. Blurs the boundaries of rules, amplifying or diminishing the effects of Beander abilities, including but not limited to damage, authority, loss of control, and madness. It is ineffective against backlash caused by the Chaos pathway and True God levels. Negative effect. Directly face a mental pollution from an outer deity. Ring of Mysteries. Formed from 1. Scholar of Yore. Beander characteristic of the Seer pathway sequence 3. 1. Mentor of Deceit. Beander characteristic of the Marauder pathway sequence 3. And 1. Wanderer. Beander characteristic of the Apprentice pathway sequence 3, fused with some dark gold mist. Ability 1. Summons images from the holder's historical gaps, which can be people or objects. The more detailed the understanding of the corresponding history and events, the more real it is, the higher the probability of success, and the longer it lasts. Only one historical projection can be summoned at a time. 2. Steal a Beander ability and make it one's own. The greater the difference in rank, the higher the probability of successful theft. 3. The holder can roam the spirit world and record 3 demigod-level Beander abilities and 5 Beander abilities below demigod. The higher the sequence, the greater the probability of failure. Once recorded abilities are used, they disappear and need to be re-recorded. Negative effect. Irregularly and involuntarily chants the honorific name of the Lord of the Mysteries, accompanied by whispers and strong pollution. After the initial shock and joy, Aaron realized something was amiss. What does semi-sealed state mean? And only the 2 Beander characteristics left by God Almighty are in a semi-sealed state. The ones left by the celestial worthy are not sealed. However, this is understandable. After all, items formed from angel-level Beander characteristics can be called Class 0 sealed artifacts in the 7 Orthodox churches and various secret organizations. But neither the Ring of Wisdom nor the Scepter of Sun Chasing, in terms of their abilities or negative effects, clearly reach that level. The only explanation is that God Almighty sealed part of their power when leaving them, and as compensation, also eliminated most of the negative effects. A pillar-level outer deity certainly has the ability to do so. What surprises me most is the Eye of Chaos. The torment of whispers and roars from the first epic to the 4th epic has finally paid off. Although the Sephira nation of disorder assimilated this uniqueness, I have already fused with the nation of disorder. To some extent, I can indirectly mobilize the power of this uniqueness through the Sephira, with the Sephira bearing most of the backlash. The remaining items left by the celestial worthy were not sealed. The Book of Chaos was formed from a stripped outer deity sequence 1 Beander characteristic, but its ability duplicates that of the Eye of Chaos, and its negative effects are too severe, definitely at the level of a Class 0 sealed artifact. The most likely use for it is to attempt to accommodate an outer deity pathway uniqueness and a sequence 1 Beander characteristic after achieving outer deity status. This would most likely lead to becoming an outer deity closest to a pillar, or even directly achieving pillar-level outer deity status. Only then can one truly have the confidence to face the outer deities beyond the primordial one's barrier. The raven with a white ring around its right eye, leading the group, lowered its head to glance at Medici, and a human voice came from its mouth. It's just a test of Everknight's attitude. Even if Zeratul recovers his complete attendant of mysteries, he's still just a slightly larger pawn. But you, tisk tisk, it seems you've gotten that guy's tacit approval. It flapped its wings, looking at Trier not far away, and sighed mockingly. How proud, an undefilable son. Ignoring Amon's sarcastic remarks, Medici shrugged his shoulders, his deep eyes, flickering with flames, also looked at Trier, and he muttered to himself. The Iron and Blood Cross Order's century-long exploration can finally be put to use. Rather than letting that conqueror characteristic continue to be wasted on your descendant, it's better to complete me. As he spoke, the flesh on Medici's cheek wriggled, and a human face vaguely emerged, but under the influence of the bloody Shang-Chi mark between his eyebrows, it could never truly form. Finding Medici's reaction uninteresting, the raven with a white ring around its right eye dissipated. As its playful voice echoed, a 12-segment worm of time floated down. I have some avatars still remaining there. I haven't retrieved them to avoid provoking certain sensitive guys. Take this, you will get the help you want. Mist Sea, Lasha Island, Emerald Palace. The mystical reenactment of the 9 Cauldrons stood majestically. Melissa, no longer as anxious as before after receiving a response from the fool, was learning Beyander knowledge in the field of constellations with Catlia's help. As adjacent pathways, Constellation's master and astronomer have commonalities in potion digestion and certain taboos. Catlia's experience can help you avoid many detours. Once you have completely digested the potion, I will provide you with an opportunity to complete the advancement ritual. Only by gaining divinity can you truly become my disciple. Bonoit, wearing a simple priest's robe, spoke gently. He was quite satisfied with the student Aaron had given him. After all, strictly speaking, Melissa was Bonoit's first disciple after his humanity returned. After a series of instructions, Bonoit then looked at Audrey beside him and said with a smile. The residual mental imprint within that discerner characteristic had already been cleared by Duke Aaron. This saved me time, and now the final step can be performed. Audrey was stunned for a moment upon hearing this, then became pleasantly surprised. She then followed her previous communication with Bonoit, entering her consciousness island to separate a virtual personality. At the same time, she looked around curiously and asked, "Is Bernadette not on Lasha Island?" As she spoke, a halo surged from the void beside Audrey, transforming into another, less real version of herself. This virtual personality held the blasphemy slate of the visionary pathway in her hand. The current situation is turbulent, especially with the changes in the Moses ascetic order, so Bernadette has left. If my identity weren't sensitive and unsuitable for appearing in the outside world, I probably wouldn't be able to stay out of trouble here either. Without concealing anything, Bonoit nodded slightly and explained. He waved his hand, casting the blasphemy slate along with Audrey's virtual personality into the chaotic light-emitting gray-white fragments within the giant cauldron. The blasphemy slate's grade is sufficient to bear the power of an angel. This is also the most suitable vessel I could think of, capable of maximizing the authority of this characteristic with the smallest cost. Patterns formed by symbols surged from within Bonoit, integrating the discerner characteristic, which had been forged to the final step, along with Audrey's virtual personality, into the blasphemy slate. Audrey, who had maintained contact with the virtual personality, felt a momentary trance, as if she saw countless symbolic patterns and strange designs overlapping and extending, piercing into the surrounding environment, even allowing her to glimpse the essence of this space constructed based on mystical reenactment. This indescribable, wonderful feeling flashed by. When Audrey came back to her senses, she noticed the visionary card quietly suspended before her, half illusory and half real, as if it could disappear into the collective unconscious sea at any moment. At the deepest part of Calderon, at the end of a tributary of the river of eternal darkness, illusory, almost lightless ripples spread through the gray-white mist, and a faint glow surged from the crack in the corpse gate. Aaron, who was already prepared, raised his hand to block the surrounding gray-white mist and grasped the faint glow. This is the Western continent's ritual system. A bone-chilling coldness came from his palm, bringing a slight sting. Aaron raised his eyebrows, examining the black talisman engraved with numerous symbols that materialized after the faint glow dissipated. With Aaron's current grade and his degree of integration with the Nation of Disorder, this medium was enough to get a glimpse and further refine the envisioned system of blessings unique to the Nation of Disorder. Although due to initial caution, neither side revealed too much to each other. Even the most basic exchange of information allowed Aaron to learn a great deal. The existence who called himself Underworld Taoist was more like a collective consciousness to some extent. Over a long period of time, he had gained some understanding of the world beyond the Western continent through the death imprint of Alista Tudor, which had merged into the river of eternal darkness. What surprised Aaron most was that this Underworld Taoist knew that the Evernight goddess had obtained the uniqueness of the death pathway. He showed no hostility towards this and even actively expressed his willingness to contact the Evernight goddess. And from the veiled content he revealed, Aaron could confirm that the Mother Goddess of Depravity's previous influence on the Mother Nest had also affected the Western continent, which was based on Saphira. Holding this special talisman, Aaron looked at the corpse gate again. The gray-white barrier's influence on him seemed to have weakened considerably. He could even vaguely see the figure wearing a rusty iron crown and strange long robes. I will hand it over to the Evernight goddess. Without revealing too much of his need for the crack eroded by the river of eternal darkness, Aaron nodded slightly towards the figure, making a concise promise in his native language, firmly grasping the stepping stone of his outer deity descendant identity. Without further delay, dark golden light surged around Aaron, forcefully correcting the rules distorted by the river of eternal darkness tributary, and he directly teleported out of Calderon. Suspended deep within the spirit world, Aaron silently gazed at the ancient divine kingdom shrouded in gray-white mist. Although the water from the river of eternal darkness had been obtained, the appearance of the underworld Taoist forced him to reconsider his original plan of using the hidden heavenly venerable barrier loophole in Calderon. I still need to contact the Evernight goddess as soon as possible. I can feel that the state of the underworld Taoist and the river of eternal darkness is completely different from mine and the Nation of Disorder. This should also be the reason for his display of goodwill. With thoughts swirling in his mind, Aaron withdrew his gaze and quickly left the spirit world. The abstract painting-like spirit world faded behind him as Aaron, arriving at the Hornassus mountain range, casually obliterated his lingering traces, his gaze sweeping across the south. That was the border with the central plateau of the northern continent, and also the headquarters of the Sanguine, but it was not his destination for this trip. Aaron merely glanced before retracting his gaze, looking up at the cosmos, which was twisted into authority and symbolism, and casually set up a ritual of sacrifice and bestowal. He had already learned from the god of steam and machinery about the tense atmosphere within the cosmos. Rather than risking exposure to search for the Evernight goddess in the cosmos, he had a better method, which could also resolve a previously lingering issue. The Evernight goddess, more sublime than the cosmos, more ancient than eternity. The solemn, low ancient Hermes language echoed, and a rich feminine power began to surge. Sensing a certain gaze directed at him, Aaron concisely mentioned the river of eternal darkness and expressed his desire to re-enter the hidden, night kingdom. Aaron originally expected the goddess's divine descent avatar to arrive, but instead, a profound sacrificial door emerged from the feminine tide, and solemn, serene deep sleep flowers drifted out, turning into scattered light particles that enveloped him. Without resisting the pull of this power, Aaron instantly returned to the main peak of the Hornassus mountain range, to the ancient palace that imprisoned Antigonus. Following his spiritual intuition, Aaron looked at the huge stone chair standing in the center of the palace. Antigonus, who had originally returned to a normal human form, now showed a faint tendency to disintegrate back into transparent worms, and a considerable part of his body had even mutated into slippery tentacles spreading outwards. Has it deteriorated to this extent? Aaron frowned, sensing that the imprint solidified by the power of the nation of disorder within Antigonus's body was already riddled with holes from erosion, and the original balance was on the verge of collapse. I need to additionally suppress the death uniqueness, and the influence of the crimson symbolism on me is more severe than anticipated, thus limiting my influence on Antigonus. Even if you hadn't mentioned it this time, I was planning to have Ariana bring you here later to handle this matter. A soft, melodious voice sounded from behind Aaron, like a lullaby in the night. Without turning around, Aaron had already seen the Evernight goddess, dressed in layers of black long skirts, her face obscured by a thin black veil, from the spiritual feedback. She stood in the gently rippling darkness, giving an unreal feeling. This was clearly not her true body, but merely a projection reflected through a hidden authority. Nodding slightly, Aaron ignored the rising and falling whispers in the palace and raised his hand towards the distorted figure on the throne, as dark golden light poured out like a tide. Antigonus's mutation was, in the end, a hidden danger he had left behind in order to digest the balancer potion as quickly as possible and seize the opportunity to advance to sequence 1. Now that he had accommodated the uniqueness, he naturally had to deal with the original problem. The slippery tentacles spreading from the throne seemed to sense something and instinctively began to resist, but under a series of strictly structured prohibitions, completely targeting the high-level authority of the full pathway, Antigonus's figure returned to normal. Compared to Russell, who merely possessed the status, Antigonus's situation was clearly more complex. Fortunately, a portion of celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings' will was taken away by Zeratul along with that attendant of mysteries characteristic. Otherwise, the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings might truly have revived within Antigonus under the previous stimulation. The immense power leveraged the rules, repairing and reinforcing the originally riddled imprint, rebalancing these two wills that were both opposing and fused. To be safe, Aaron, who had just swept Calderon and was somewhat wealthy, did not hesitate, directly taking out the wolf-headed snake-bodied statue containing a tributary of the river of eternal darkness from the nation of disorder. A colorless drop of liquid, carrying a strong aura of eternal silence, then dripped down, merging into Antigonus's body, which Aaron had controlled, causing all spiritual imprints to fall into eternal slumber. Aaron lowered his gaze and sensed it. With these two layers of seals combined with the Night Kingdom's inherent hidden authority suppression, he would not need to worry about this half-fool having problems for at least a year. As for a year later, thinking of Klein, who was still dawdling at sequence 4, Aaron's expression became much more serious, and he had already made a decision in his heart. Only then did he look at the Evernight goddess, at those eyes that seemed to condense the stars. During this exploration of Calderon City, I found the node where the river of eternal darkness eroded the seal to draw out a tributary, and I came into contact with the Howley lineage, which is deeply connected to the river of eternal darkness. The representative of this force calls himself, Underworld Taoist. After roughly recounting the situation at the time, Aaron handed the talisman given by the Underworld Taoist to the Evernight goddess, subtly indicating that he hoped to use the rift eroded by the river of eternal darkness to infiltrate the sealed western continent in reverse at an appropriate time. The Evernight goddess scrutinized the black talisman in her hand, then looked deeply at Aaron upon hearing his words, but showed no other obvious emotional fluctuations, saying softly and soothingly, "I will try to establish contact with him. In return, I will do my best to facilitate what you wish, and any intelligence obtained from the Western continent will be shared with you." Having received the desired promise, Aaron's expression relaxed considerably. After putting away the wolf-headed snake-bodied statue, he pondered for a moment before briefly outlining the agreement he had reached with the god of steam and machinery, finally continuing. George III might attempt to impact the Black Emperor soon. After his failure, the Loan royal family will exist in name only. That god of combat will definitely seize this opportunity to unite all forces, so we need to confirm whether the Earth Mother's current state can still execute the previous plan. This concerned his ascension ritual, and Aaron couldn't help but care. He needed the most accurate intelligence possible to prepare various contingency plans. Considering the mother goddess of depravity's influence on the earth and moon pathways, Aaron also dared not rashly pray for confirmation, only hoping that these two goddesses, who had been scheming since ancient epochs, had some more hidden and accurate means of communication privately. It does not affect the previous plan. She is indeed affected by the mother goddess of depravity, but the barrier ultimately exists, and the influence is not that severe. The main issue is that the identity of Omi Bella, which she replaced, had some problems and needs to be covered up by this, so the sanguine side still needs your care. The soft voice gradually drifted, and the Evernight goddess, holding the talisman, dissolved into the gently rippling darkness, as if she had never been there. Aaron nodded understandingly, feeling that this trip was complete and no longer lingered. With the tacit permission of the Hidden Authority, he easily left the Hidden Night Kingdom and returned to the Hornassus mountain range. Recalling the sealed Antigonus, Aaron skillfully took out the magic mirror Rhodes, flicked the mirror surface to stop its fawning flattery, and said plainly, "Tell Mr. Fool, see you in Pritz Harbor." For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.